Help me welcome Dr. Sue Johnson.
Hi, everybody. Those kinds of introductions just make me feel like I want to go and take a nap. So anyway. Some of you seem like an awful long way away, but maybe as I get safer, you'll come closer to me, especially if I reflect how hard it must be for you to sit at the back so far away from me. And you're laughing, so I know that most of you have read my books and know that that's sort of typical of the sort of things I say. But I'd like to just get a feel, because we're going to talk about applying EFT to a particular population in the next couple of days. So I'd like to just get a feel for how many folks have done an externship in EFT right here. Oh my goodness, good Lord. Okay, that's quite a lot. How many folks are kind of new to EFT? That's quite a lot too. Okay, so we've got a pretty varied audience. All right. For the next 2 days, we're going to try and sort of immerse you in the world of how to work with couples, especially how to work with couples where there is a dragon in the room. That image, which I use in my trauma book, comes from one of my clients that I'll probably end up talking to you about, because she's in the trauma book, and she's called Charlene in the trauma book, but the trouble when I talk is I can't keep to the phony name, so actually she's called Charlotte. She won't mind me telling you that. I saw her, I wrote that book in 2002, and every June she calls me up on my phone and says, "Hello, Sue, how are you? I just want you to know we're fine, and we're still having cocoa on the couch." And I'll tell you what that means a little bit later, but it's really good. So I'm probably going to talk to you about Charlotte. So I'm going to tell you stories, I'm going to give you images, I'm going to try and move you emotionally, because this is the way you learn about EFT. To do EFT, you have to be emotionally present, especially to work with trauma survivors. You don't trust people you can't see. And if you can't let a trauma survivor see who you are, they'll probably comply with what you ask them to do. They'll probably do what you tell them, and you might even think, oh, this is working because they're being a good client, but they're not with you. And it's very different. The difference between a client doing what they're told and a client really being with you and allowing you into their lives is really different. And with trauma survivors particularly, you can feel that difference. Because if you work with them for a while, you know what this wall feels like that you keep bumping up against when they say to you, yes, but then they look down and away and hold their breath. Which really means, I'm telling you yes, but I have no intention of actually letting you anywhere near me, you stupid little therapist. Okay? Because you're not safe and nobody's safe, and who the hell do you think you are that you're going to make me change my rules that have kept me alive for the last 30 years? Are you kidding me? What makes you so special? So you have to be able to turn up emotionally and be emotionally engaged and present to do EFT, and I'm inviting you to be that way with us in the next couple of days. Okay? So where to begin? What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to talk to you about EFT, because there's some people in this audience who aren't that familiar with it. I'm going to talk to you about EFT and about attachment. If you know me at all, you know that I can talk about attachment for 6 months easy, right? I'm going to talk to you, and I'm very passionate about attachment, and I don't apologize for that at all. So I'm going to talk about that this morning. The main reason I'm so passionate about attachment is not because of all the amazing studies, not because it's the most coherent, clear, and parsimonious theory of human development and personality and functioning I've ever read. The main reason I'm passionate about attachment is it never lets me down as a clinician. ever, ever, never. It always gives me a map to take into the therapy room that I can count on. So for me, attachment perspective is my safe haven, secure base in therapy. And I'm going to talk to you not just about Charlotte, but I'm going to talk to you about Carl. And I think when I tell you the story of Carl, you'll explain something about how I see the understanding that attachment gives us as a safe, I can use it as a safe place in therapy that I can go to when the dragon comes into the room. The dragon of trauma comes into the room with the clients, and all sorts of emotions are happening. And the thing with trauma clients is emotions can switch really, really fast. Somebody can switch from equilibrium to rage to sadness to toxic shame in a second. And if you lose your balance, you're smiling at me, you know what I mean, yes? And one of the reasons I don't lose my balance is I know that I have a map to what's going on called attachment theory. So I'm going to talk to you about that this morning. Hopefully, we're going to play a little bit, maybe one exercise this morning. And some of you, if you've done an externship with me, you might have already done this exercise, but it doesn't matter. You know, I've done it with audiences lots of times, and each time I do it, I learn. So, and then this afternoon, we'll go into trauma, and we'll look at a couple of tapes, and we'll look at the whole idea of using EFT to work with trauma clients. When I first used to talk about this, people used to say to me, well, you can't use EFT with anyone who's really vulnerable. Men won't like it because they don't like to talk about their emotions, and really vulnerable people won't like it because they'll collapse and decompensate and freak out and go crazy and absolutely lose their cool when you do this sort of thing because it's way too emotional. So let's be real clear. I've never seen that. And that's not what the research says, right? But nevertheless, you have to know what you're doing. Because if regular clients are vulnerable, and we're all vulnerable in love, there is no way out of that. And if you shut down and shut other people out to avoid that vulnerability, you're even more vulnerable. And you've missed the most powerful joy in your life, which is to be connected with another human being. So there's no way out of that vulnerability. You see it in all your clients, you see it in all your distressed couples. But in trauma, that vulnerability has just absolutely gone through the roof. So you do have to know how to apply EFT in a sensitive way. And so we'll talk about that starting this afternoon and tomorrow. Then tomorrow we're going to do more exercises, and we're going to look at more tapes, and I'm going to show you a training tape that we did with a highly escalated couple called EFT in Action. Tomorrow we'll talk a lot about working with escalated and numbed out clients, because that's basically how trauma survivors show up in your session. And tomorrow afternoon we'll talk about what we call relationship injuries. We'll talk about relationship traumas that we call attachment injuries, which put regular couples who are in distress into the place where they're actually dealing not just with chronic distress and disconnection. It puts them into the place where they're facing a relationship trauma that they cannot go around or over or rationalize. And each time they begin to get close, it blows up in their face and they are unable to trust each other. If you don't know what I mean, if you don't know EFT very well, for example, our understanding of relationship traumas started when we looked at people and we couldn't figure out why they couldn't do the hold me tight conversations, which are the conversation in stage 2 of EFT that really moves people into permanent change and secure attachment. We couldn't figure out why some couples could go all the way through and manage to do the hold me tight conversations, and other couples would stop right there and say, no, that I've gone all this way, we have relationships improved, and I'm not going any further, because My brain tells me, never again. Don't you let this other person across that line. Never again. And we started going in and looking at that never again. And it was always about what we call a relationship trauma, which is a violation of connection at a key moment of vulnerability that the couple have not been able to heal. The key question in all love relationships is, are you there for me? If I call, will you come? Can I count on you to come? Right? Will you give me this sense of security in the world? And what we're going to talk about tomorrow afternoon is key moments when the answer to that question has been no. No. I'm not going to turn and talk to him. I'm not going to turn and open up to him, because all I can remember right now is sitting in the back of a taxi, holding my baby in a buttercup container, and he's sitting in the front, and he's staring out the window, and he's not talking to me, and he's not holding me, and he didn't come to the hospital, and he didn't hold me, and he says, "What are you talking about? It was a medical emergency. I got you the best doctors, I filled in the forms, I made sure everything was okay." And she says, "You weren't there for me. When I needed you, you weren't there." And if you don't know what to do at that point, that couple have got to some sort of equilibrium in their relationship, but they're not going to go through into any real lasting connection. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow afternoon. And that includes things like affairs, but it's much bigger than affairs. It's moments of vulnerability when we call for our partner and we suddenly reach and there's nobody there. So that's what we're going to do in the next 2 days. Hopefully we're also going to have fun. I like to have fun when I teach. People tell me I'm funny. I don't think of myself as funny, but hopefully I can be a bit funny sometimes. I'm funny when I start to play. Okay, so hopefully we're going to have some fun as well. All right? All right. So where shall we start? On the plane from Ottawa, I read the book in the middle. And I was taking notes. And my husband said, "What's that book? Who is that?" I said, "It's me, actually." And he said, "You're going really weird." I said, "I know. But, I haven't read this book for a long time. It's not bad. It's not bad." And I remembered that of all the books that I've written, I actually like this one the best. I'm not sure I like Love Sense. I always like my last book, so I like Love Sense a lot. But I think I liked it the best because I actually wrote it on a beach in New Zealand, which is, hey, it's not a bad place. This beautiful house over this beach, right? That's where I wrote it. But I think I like it also because I didn't write it in my study with all my books and studies and big boxes of studies around me. I couldn't take them to New Zealand. So there's something clearer about it because I just had to sit and sort of write it. Okay, so I invite you to actually read that book if you're interested. It's old in that it came out in 2002, but I invite you to actually read that book. And at the time that I wrote that book, I was working with a lot of trauma clients because I was running the marital and family therapy team at the big hospital in town. One day a week I'd go in and we'd assess these cases and do clinical supervision and work in front of a one-way mirror. So in that book, there's lots of folks in that book that I saw in the hospital setting. So that is, if you like, that's the book to read if you're particularly interested in this topic. If you don't know EFT, I would suggest you read The Practice of Emotionally Focused Couples Therapy. That's 2004. And there is a workbook that goes with that book if you don't know EFT. It's a big, fat book. You can use it to keep the bathroom door open. That's what I do in my house. It's a big, fat book. And it's exercises on EFT, including there's one chapter on trauma. Please don't email me and complain to me that it's work. It says right on the front, workbook. Okay, and you don't have to do it all in one setting. Okay, so if you don't know EFT very well, I suggest you read The Practice of Emotionally Focused Couples Therapy. I suggest you look at the workbook. I suggest you look on the ICEF site. It's www.iceft.com. There's lots of training tapes on the ICEF site. There's lots of resources for you. There's lists of all the studies we've done. There's lists of all the articles references for the articles. So I suggest you go to that site as a resource. If you want to find a supervisor in EFT, it's easier in North America, but even in places like Finland and Russia, you can look on that site and look for an EFT supervisor. If you can't find one, phone us up and we'll find you one, okay? Because EFT is going all over the world now. So please use that site. It's a real resource. And if you want to look at something less academic and you want to look at lots of little clips and lots of little videos and little blogs, the last one we put up was I wrote with Stephanie Carnes on sex addiction. If you want to look at lots of little quick things that are really designed for the public but professionals also find useful, I suggest you go to drsuejohnson.com. And one of the tapes I'm going to show you today is on that site, so you can look at it again. It's myself and Ed Tronick, the developmental psychologist from Harvard, looking at what happens to a baby when the mother stops responding, and then looking at what happens in an adult couple when the husband stops responding. And the absolutely brilliant, incredible thing is the drama is exactly the same, whether you are 1 year old or 30 years old or 50 years old or 90 years old. Your brain is wired for bonding. Your brain is wired to respond to others. And one of the reasons why trauma, particularly interpersonal trauma, is so damaging for people in life is that it interferes with that social engagement system. It interferes with your ability to bond with other people and to turn to other people and get the source of comfort and caring that we all need in this world, because we are a fragile species. Have you noticed? We don't have claws, our teeth are quite small. I mean, basically, in terms of being the dominant species on this planet, how did we do that? Duh. We did it by reading the messages on each other's faces, by creating a social brain that allowed us to tune into each other and cooperate and come together in tribes and families and in special bonds with people who will care for us no matter what. That's how we did it. That's why we're the dominant species on this planet. There's an old idea that Charles Darwin talked about survival of the fittest. He never used that phrase. That was one of his commentators, in fact. If you read Darwinian theory, what Charles Darwin talks about, and what all the new science talks about in neuroscience and in social psychology and in attachment, is survival goes to the most nurtured. Survival goes to those who can connect with other people and use other people as a resource. And one of the dreadful things about trauma is that it isolates people, and people cannot heal in isolation. Hey, that's really everything I wanted to say. And now I'll teach you Argentine tango instead, okay? My other obsession in life, apart from my family and birds, I like birds, is Argentine tango. So please forgive me if occasionally I use tango as a metaphor for you. It's just part of my reality. I dance for about 10 hours a week, so almost as much as I do therapy. So I use that image a lot. So trauma isolates. It cuts us off from the greatest resource we have, which is the caring and connection with other people. And that is amazingly significant. And so I want you to think about what we're trying to do when we work with couples is we're trying to create that connection, bring that connection back, the ability to connect. And then we're actually consciously making that connection into a healing arena for the traumatized partner. What is the natural place to heal wounds? Trauma comes from the Latin word to wound. What is the natural place to heal wounds? In the arms of people who love you. And we all know that. I don't have to tell you that. You know that in your bones. That was wired into your brain the day you were born. You know that. That was wired into your brain before you were born. You picked up the prosody in your mother's voice when you were in the womb. And when you come out of the womb, you'll be tuned to that voice. And you'll begin to tune into her face. And this is the music that your nervous system starts to dance to. This is the music that starts to structure your nervous system. So we're trying to heal relationships in EFT, and we're also, especially in this 2 days, we're talking about creating relationships that heal. And if you're talking about trauma survivors, you know you're not just talking about PTSD. You're talking about things like clinical depression, suicidality, you're talking about addictions. There's really not that many ways we have of dealing with life when the dragon comes for us. There really isn't. We just have a few, actually. And the trouble is that if we don't have a person to turn to, then the ones that we use, the strategies we use, they might work for a moment, but they often end up becoming prisons and keeping the trauma going. What gets us through the dark night ends up keeping us standing constantly facing the dragon. Imagine that image. I started the trauma book with it. It comes from the Celtic mythologies. The Celts were a warrior people. The Celt, I looked in my genealogy, apparently I'm a Celt. I don't know, they were fierce, whatever. I guess I can be fierce. But the Celts were a warrior people, and their image of life was very dark. They said life is like standing in a dark, narrow passageway while a dragon comes for you. There is no doubt you are going to lose. You are going to lose. You are going to be vulnerable, and in the end, if we want to get existential about it, we all have to face the fact that life ends and pain and loss are part of life. There is no doubt you are going to lose. So the Celts said, therefore, there is only one thing that gives meaning to life and that matters: how well you fight. And if you fight well, then you are a warrior. And you are part of our tribe. And when you die, we will put your body in a longboat. And we set fire to the longboat and we push it out to sea. Anybody watching Game of Thrones? There was a bit of that in the last Game of Thrones. They put the Iron Man kings, they don't put him on fire. They just, actually it's quite tacky compared to the Celts. He's on a sort of raft with a bit of floaty stuff. But anyway, they push him out to sea. So for the Celts, life is about standing in a dark passageway with your back to the wall. There's no escape, and a dragon is coming for you. However, I think for us, there is something else besides how well you fight. There is the fact that if you reach in the darkness, which we all do, because isolation is inherently traumatizing for human beings. I'm going to say that again. Isolation is inherently traumatizing for human beings. You don't have to get intricate to traumatize somebody, just leave them alone, which is why in Canada right now we're having a huge public fight about leaving people alone in isolation in our prisons, because then they, guess what? They go crazy. Surprise, surprise. And they commit suicide, and they become even more difficult. Isn't that amazing? So, isolation is inherently traumatizing. What you see in most of your couples is not just the results of your trauma couples, not just the results of trauma, but the result of isolation on top of that. And living with someone you love and not being able to reach them is amazingly distressing. It's like being hungry and living in a room where there's a beautiful meal laid out for you, but there's glass between you and the meal. Your longing for connection is there. That's wired in. You can't get rid of that. That's in your bones. But you can't connect. You're too terrified, so you're isolated. So you're standing alone facing the dragon. And you'll reach in the darkness, because that's just who you are. You're a bonding animal. You'll reach. And if another hand meets yours, and you're not alone in the darkness, that changes everything. Then the fight is worth fighting. Then there is also joy in the darkness. Then the dragon doesn't look so huge. Right? Everything changes if you're not alone in the dark. And we all know that. You know that. It's just taken social science a long time to actually start to tune into what ordinary people know, the wisdom deep in your bones. You know that. And by the way, if we talk about spiritual traditions, that's in spiritual traditions too. You know, the Buddhists talk about the fact that you need a community of similar people. You need to be able to rely on this community, because they will help you reach balance and enlightenment. If you read the Christian Bible, right, God is called God the Father. And, you know, if you think about the image of Jesus, we could talk about this a lot. Jesus in the Bible is accessible, responsive, and engaged, A-R-E, and there's tons of stories about Jesus being accessible, responsive, and engaged. The woman who comes to the well, she's unclean. And somebody, I can't remember who, says to Christ, you shouldn't talk to her, and she's not allowed to come and talk to you. Okay, she's sort of outside. What does he do? He turns to her and he touches her, right? And he talks to her and he says, he basically says, I want to know about you. Who are you? Come and be with me, right? And if you can be with me, you'll be blessed. What's he talking about? It depends. You can interpret it hundreds of ways. I think he's talking about the idea that come with me and be connected with me. And then you can be safe and you can grow and you can be what a human being is really supposed to be. So this whole issue of trauma and EFT, it takes on a certain existential frame here that I'm having us move into. Yeah? All right. So what else was I intending to say at the beginning? Yes. I guess I wanted to say to you that couples therapy has a reputation for being difficult. And indeed, it can be difficult. Why would it not be difficult? You're inserting yourself into one of the most powerful and complex dramas that human beings ever create. You're opening the door and walking into a distressed love relationship. Never mind if there's a dragon there or not. You're opening the door into a distressed love relationship. And what you have is two people who have lost their emotional balance, who are fighting for their survival, and where the person they count on has suddenly become the enemy. And what you're facing is two people's basic concepts about the trustworthiness of other people, their own lovability. There's all kinds of emotional music playing. You're watching how these two people habitually regulate their affect at moments of threat. You're watching their body memory come out and guide this dance with the person who's most important to them in their lives. As this person becomes a threat, you're watching basic fear, basic sadness, basic loss, basic panic, all in your office. Why wouldn't it be difficult? And if you add the dragon in the room, where things can shift in a moment, and emotions are amazingly powerful, and people are fragmented in their experience. They move from one emotion to another, and they don't even know why. That's even more difficult. Yes, it's true, couple therapy is difficult, which is why we have to train people to do it. Jay LeBeau says that 70% of mental health professionals now say they see couples. Wow! Because we haven't trained those guys. We haven't trained anywhere near that number. So there's lots of folks out there who just think that seeing a couple is about getting two individuals in a room and getting them to have a chat. Right? Don't think so. A lot more complicated than that. So yes, couples is hard. But if you have a map and you understand the drama, you know what it's about, and you have a clear sense of direction and a clear sense of tools, then couple therapy can be the most powerful arena for change of all therapy modalities. What I like about couple therapy is that at this point, I feel like it's easier for me to get personal transformation in couple therapy than when I do individual therapy. Because I've got the most powerful motivating force in the human body working with me, the longing to be with the person who loves them. That's the most powerful motivating force that you can have in therapy. I've got that working with me. And I've got the other partner there. And in good couple therapy, partners don't just come together and get a better relationship. They change each other. They grow each other. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what love is all about. They grow each other. So you can change individuals, individual symptomatology, a couple relationship, which is the biggest resource that people can have in our society anyway. We don't live in small little villages anymore. Most of us really depend on our partner in a way that perhaps human beings have never done before to their life mate. So you can change the relationship, and when you do that, you change the family. Think about that. It's an incredible arena for change. But the other thing I want to say to you as a therapist working with traumatized clients is, these are the clients that I remember. These are the clients that I wept with, that thrilled me, that challenged me, that enraged me. These are the clients where I walk out and think, I don't know what to do with this dude. Who sent him to me and how can I get back at them? But something happens to the therapist when you stand beside somebody and not just face the fear of isolation and all the regular stuff that's going on, but also look with them and say, yeah, I see it. I see the dragon. I'm standing right here with you. Something happens. It's almost like I grow as a human being by standing next to this person and facing the dragon called human frailty with them. I understand something more than I did before I started working with them. So working with trauma couple therapy can be hard, especially if you don't have a map. I hope that EFT gives you that map. I think it does, because we get lots of feedback from the people we train that couple therapy, once you have a map, can become exhilarating and fascinating, and you can feel powerful and competent and learn with your clients. But even with trauma in the room, couple therapy, you need that map. It can be thrilling and amazing, and these are the clients I remember. And these are the clients where it touches me when they send me emails and say, "Hi, Sue, we're still dealing with the dragon sometimes, but now he's in a cage. And he's not in the middle of my living room, blocking my view. He's in a cage off to the side in the spare room," right? And what's she telling me? She's saying, it's okay, we're growing. I am no longer defined by this trauma. My life is no longer defined by this trauma. This is amazingly rewarding. But it's like everything else, including dancing tango. You have to work to get there. By the way, real tango isn't what you see on Dancing with the Stars, please believe me. That's called gymnastics. And if I did that, I'd be in the hospital. And it's also silly, okay, because you don't throw your legs up over your head and you don't do all this weird sexualized, bizarre stuff either. You know, it's a lot like a relationship. Tango is all about attunement. It's a PhD in attunement. And of course, that's why I got hooked on it. Because I went and watched these people in conservative little Ottawa one night, all dancing with each other and doing these amazing, intricate moves and steps, which they aren't in any book. You can't. And as a therapist, I was like, how do they do that? That's impossible. How can they coordinate their moves and their bodies and I don't know how they do that. And then the next step it was, I want to do it. Right? So it's like, and that's kind of what I use the images of dancing a lot and the images of attunement a lot. Right? And the thing about trauma is, if you're going to work with a trauma client, you have to attune to people who are enraged at you. You have to attune to people who won't talk to you. You have to attune to people who say, you're useless and you're a bad therapist and everything you do is wrong and I don't know why you didn't become a dentist. And that's a challenge. And that's what you have to do. And you can't do it all the time. Sometimes you just get irritated, right? But you have to be, it's like mothering. Who knows how to mother? Nobody. You think, oh, I'm going to get this little baby and he's going to be so cute. Oh, it's going to be lovely. Well, not quite. First of all, he throws up all over you and then he doesn't sleep. They didn't tell me they didn't sleep. So then you can't sleep either. So then you suddenly find that you'd like to take the baby and hurl the baby. And you think, oh my God, I'm a monster. Right? And then you don't know what's going on, and that's distressing. And it's like that. It's like learning mothering. You have to be engaged in the process and open yourself up and just learn how to do it. So I'm going to talk to you about EFT and attachment for a while. The other thing about trauma, if we're thinking about using EFT for a symptom like PTSD, traumatic stress, is that everyone who works with trauma, including Bessel van der Kolk in his new book, The Body Keeps Score, talks about the fact that trauma is multidimensional. It's really the person being taken over by helplessness and hopelessness to the point where their whole nervous system is sort of shifted in the direction of being obsessed with threat. Just think about how much of life that excludes if you're totally obsessed with threat. And it influences your body, your emotions, your connections with other people, your sense of self. This is all caught up in facing the dragon. So it's multidimensional. What I want to say about that is, if you look at, for example, Bessel's book, The Body Keeps Score, he says you have to go in on different levels. You can go in and teach people to do yoga to calm their body down, to retrain their nervous system to go back to equilibrium. You can do talk therapy to get a narrative of the trauma. It always amazes me that people don't put in there couple therapy as a powerful element for the treatment of trauma. Because what couple therapy can do is create a safe haven, secure base for healing. And that's something totally precious that impacts your sense of self, how your body operates, how your nervous system works, how your emotions work, how engaged you can be with your emotions, how you can connect with the person that's closest to you. That changes all those things. So what we're going to talk about today is not that, couple therapy is the treatment of trauma and that's all you need, not at all. Let's be clear that what we're talking about here is that couple therapy can be a necessary component for many people to heal with trauma, and a powerful component that shifts the impact of trauma and helps someone cope in a whole new world, in a whole new way with PTSD. That's what we're talking about here. Most of the people I see, traumatized clients, have been in individual therapy or will go to individual therapy after a few sessions with me. They've come in because they don't want their partner to leave them. We get soldiers who have refused treatment in our institute and won't talk to anybody, particularly anyone in the military, and they're in your session, and you say, well, how come you came here? And it's really easy, and it's pretty predictable. They say, because if she leaves me, I really am going to commit suicide. She's it. She's my lifeline. She's the only one I've got, and we're not getting along, and she says she's going to leave me. So that's why I'm here. But once you start to connect with that person and they start to trust that mental health professionals have something to give them, then often you can get them to go for individual therapy, right? You can get them to look at what's going on with their body, maybe stop drinking 8 beers a day. That might help, right? That also might help you talk to your partner, right? So we're not talking about couple therapy being, we're talking about couple therapy as a healing arena for trauma, and we're assuming that to deal with trauma effectively, you need to go out into many healing arenas. But I'm also suggesting to you that creating connection with someone you love is a powerful, powerful antidote for many of the aspects of trauma that people deal with. Okay. So let's talk about couple therapy and where couple therapy is these days. Couples therapy, and you guys have handouts, do you not? I believe you do, yes. And you will need them with you because we'll do exercises a bit later on. And while I'll put them up on the screen, you also have them in your handouts. Did I not also send you a couple of chapters as handouts? Will people remind me? No, I didn't? Oh, I thought I did. United we stand, thank you. So I would like you to read Paul Greenman and my article called United We Stand. That will also, if you get overwhelmed in the 2 days, that will also sort of hopefully ground you, bring you back to earth, and sort of give you a feel for the general framework that we're talking about. It's called United We Stand. All right, so when I talk about regular couple therapy, what I talk about is that we're going into a new era. And this is essential that we go into this new era. Because as I said before, we count on our life partners in a way that is very new in human society. If you've heard me talk before, you know that my granny grew up in a little village in England called Who. Really silly name for a village. Where do you come from? Who? No, where do you come from? Spelled H-O-O. 300 people lived in Who, and she knew every single one of them. So when she had a fight with my grandfather, she could go to Mary next door that she went to school with, or down the road to her sister, or she could go to all kinds of other people that she danced with every Saturday, took the harvest in every fall, went to church with every Sunday. She knew everybody. Imagine living in that incredible web of social support. And by the way, the internet is not a substitute for that. Your friends on Facebook, it's not quite the same as Mary that you went to school with and that you've seen every day, right? And that you trust implicitly. And if you needed Mary, you'd yell in your kitchen and Mary would pop over, right? And you know that. So it's not the same. So we depend on our partner, right? So we need to really scrap this whole idea that intimate love relationships are problems to be solved. They're just a friendship, because that's not what people want from their intimate love relationships. And that there's something you just can't understand. And we need to actually move into a place where we can understand love, teach people about love, teach people what works in love, teach people how it goes wrong, and teach people how to put it right. If we're going to have something called a stable family, if we're going to have a stable families that create human beings that can deal with a faster and faster, much more complex world, we're going to have to do that. The good news is we're doing it. And this is what I talk about in Love Sense. In the last 2 decades, we have started to study love. That in itself is revolutionary. Years and years ago, John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, was apparently sitting in his kitchen trying to write out all his theories about attachment. And he said to his wife, "What shall I call this stuff?" And she said, "Well, don't be silly. It's love. It's a theory of love." And he said, "Don't be ridiculous. Everybody hates me already. They despise me. They try to throw me out of all the professional societies in England. If I stand up and actually say that I have a theory of love, especially if I stand up and say that I believe that the drama that happens between a mother and child is basically the same as happens between adult lovers, people will laugh me out of England, and they will, well, they did it anyway, so, you know. The English have a sort of real special niche on hostility. Okay. I can say that because I'm English, okay, so I can get away with it. But, you know, it's sort of contempt, you know. Sort of the class system trained them in it, actually, for years and years and years. So he said, "Don't be ridiculous. Nobody will tolerate that. I have to call it by a big abstract word." So he called it attachment, and he still got despised and attacked and, okay. Things like the institute he spent his last professional days in wouldn't pay for him to have a secretary. He had to pay for his own secretary. This is the English know how to do this, okay? If they want you to feel like an outsider, they know how to do it, okay? So just the idea of actually understanding something like love. Well, what are we talking about? Love is Hallmark cards. Love is just sentimentality. Love is infatuation. You go into it when you're 18, and then if you're lucky, it passes, and you find a friend to be with. Love is a mystery. Love is an intoxicating mixture of sex and sentiment that nobody can understand. So if that's really true, I do think as a profession, the couple therapy modality, we should just all pack up and go home, okay, and not do couple therapy. Because let's be clear, people don't just want you to help them be a little less nasty in their fights. They don't just want you to calm things down so they can be friends. They come to you to understand what this drama is all about and how come it's a source of pain when they know deep in their bones that it should be a source of comfort and joy, and they long for that. So it is incredibly important that in the last 2 decades, we have cracked the code of love. That's what I talk about in Hold Me Tight. And that's what I talk about in, it came out in 2008, and that's what I talk about in Love Sense. Love, and I want you to think about this in terms of trauma. Love is an ancient, wired-in survival code. Survival code. Survival code, the one that's wired in to deal with the dragon. It's an ancient, wired-in survival code designed to keep the people, the few people on this planet that you totally trust and can depend on to come when you call, close to you. That's what it's designed for. It's designed to create constructive dependency. It's designed to give you a resource so that you do not face life alone. You are not wired to face life alone. I think at the end of all the Rambo movies and those movies, they should be forced to put a little line saying, this is a lot of fun, but let's remember it's a big fat fib. Because actually this guy couldn't have done this all by himself. Okay, let's just remember that. Instead of setting it up so that, the young boys all over the world think, oh, to be a man, this is what I have to be. I have to be able to go out and fight 32 army battalions and 8 apes and aliens all by myself. I have to do it all by myself. I guess the superheroes aren't doing it all by themselves, are they? They sort of rely on each other a bit. Okay, so we've started to understand what love's all about. We've started to understand the power of relationships, mental and physical health. Yes, you were thinking, oh, she's got a new concept, men ago. On mental and physical health. For example, it says something about where we are now, that what I just finished doing last week was the second version of the program that we're doing, where we're taking the Hold Me Tight educational program based on all our work into the Heart Institute in Ottawa, which is an international heart institute, because the doctors there have read the research that says that the best predictor of whether you have another heart attack or not, and how you deal with your health, is not the severity of the first heart attack. It's the quality of your relationship with your most intimate other. Wow. Yeah, wow. The best predictor of whether you have another heart attack, the health of your heart, this is people like Ucino, U-C-H-I-N-O, and I refer to it, I think, in Love Sense. The best predictor of your cardiac health, whether you have another heart attack or not, how you deal with heart attack, is not the severity of the first heart attack. It's the quality of your intimate relationship with your intimate other. If you think about that, that makes incredible sense. Because when your heart rate goes up and you are filled with adrenaline and cortisol, a touch from your intimate other coming over and saying, it's okay, sweetie, you just did a bit of exercise, all right? You're just going to sit in the chair and I'm going to sit beside you. Okay, you're not going to have another heart attack. You're just going to talk to me and I'm going to calm you down. And if it gets bad, we'll go to the hospital. But I think you just got scared because you worked so hard. Imagine the impact on that. And imagine the impact on, I'll give you an example from one of my couples. She's worried about him having another heart attack. This is a distressed couple. And she says to him, I think there's too much wine in that glass. Do you see there's too much wine in that glass? Don't you remember what the doctor said was, don't drink so much wine? Didn't the doctor say that? Because the doctor listened to her voice. He says, there you go again. There you go again. All you do is remind me of when I was sick. That's all you do. You just remind me of when I was sick. But you know what? I'm not sick now, so I'm going to have 3 glasses. And then I'm going to go for a drive in my car. Oh, real good, man. That's just great. Get the idea? Yes. Not only that, but the pills we take for things like heart attack change all kinds of responses in somebody. So suddenly the other person is married to a stranger. Now, heart attack, physical illness can be traumatizing. And so it's not accident that people who are dealing with diabetes have now asked us to come and do the program for diabetics. People dealing with breast cancer are talking to us about coming and doing the program for breast cancer. It doesn't matter what dragon you face. The biggest resource for human beings is loving contact with another person. It tranquilizes our nervous system. It puts us into emotional balance. It allows us to see just how big the dragon is. Suddenly the dragon shrinks because we're not facing him alone. I don't know why we always think the dragon is male, whatever. Okay, so power of relationships on mental and physical health. Heart disease Immune functioning, Kelcock Glasser put wounds on people's hands in Ohio, wounds on people's hands with suction cups. And then she gets them to interact with their partner. The partners that get into nasty conflicts, particularly with lots of criticism in them, isolation is traumatizing and criticism hurts. And I mean literally, that's not a metaphor. Couples who got into all kinds of critical arguments, their wounds would take longer to heal. Why? Because when you're facing threat, your immune system becomes irrelevant. Who cares about you catching a cold when you're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger? Your brain says it really doesn't matter. Take the immune system offline and put every bit of energy into just dealing with this threat, right? So Kelcock Glasser talks about this in terms of how connection with other people impacts our mental and physical health. She talks about it in terms of the immune system and how the immune system is impacted by the quality of our connection with other people. Depression. You're at least, this depends on the person you're reading. Some people say up to 10 times. I think the most reliable person says, Hawkley talks about between 2 and 3 times more likely to be clinically depressed if you feel disconnected from the main people in your life, if you feel alone. Lovers are the regulators of each other's physiology. Quite interesting to me how some of the trauma literature now, the somatic experiencing folks, talk about how you can regulate your own physiology. And indeed you can. You can do it by breathing, you can do it by mindfulness, you can do it by yoga, you can regulate it. That's great. Let's teach people to do that. But let's not forget that the most efficient and powerful way to regulate your physiology is by turning to another person, by connecting with another person. And I invite you to read the work of my colleague Jim Cohn, that I did the brain scan study with, and I'll talk to you a bit about that later. I did the brain scan study with Jim Cohn, and what Jim Cohn does is he does hand-holding experiments. And he does them because years and years ago as a graduate student, he worked with a case with an older man who'd been traumatized and traumatized and traumatized, and for whom nothing worked except when he finally brought the man's wife into the session, and he got the wife to hold the man's hand. And while the wife was holding the man's hand, the man would talk, and the man would look at things, right? And Jim got so fascinated by this that 20 years later, he's still doing hand-holding experiments, right? And what he talks about is, and this is not the way we think about it, the most basic thing for human beings, the social baseline, the way we have of regulating our emotions, our physiology, is by social connection with other human beings. And that's the most efficient way. Regulating your own affect can be exhausting. You can't do it for long. For example, if I ask you to suppress your emotion, James Gross says, the suppression of emotion is amazingly hard work. And it's such hard work that it ends up agitating you. You become more and more aroused, and that you can only do it for so long and then you explode. Right? But we're taught that that's a good thing to do. You know, we're taught that you need to teach people. We don't use the word suppress. We say contain, calm people down. Well, the most basic way we have of calming down is to basically turn to other people. I'll give you an example. I invite you to go read Jim Cohn's research. Coan. He's at the University of Virginia. You can find him on the internet. You can find everything on the internet. But for example, Jim talks about and this shows you how this new science is teaching us, couples therapists. Jim talks about Prophet, who does studies of visual perception. I'm a couples therapist, right? What do I care about studies of visual perception? But I do, because what Prophet found is if you get people to calculate the size of a hill, you say, tell me how big that hill is. Your brain is always thinking about energy, resource use, and how to conserve energy and the resources you have. So you'll look at the hill, and you can calculate that it's maybe, so big. If I put a pile of bricks in a backpack on your back and ask you to calculate the hill, you see it as higher. Your brain adjusts. Your visual system adjusts, and you actually see the hill as higher. If I get your best friend to come and stand beside you, your brain cancels out the effect of the bricks. Why? Because your social brain knows that you have a resource called another person standing beside you, and that changes everything. Climbing the hill alone isn't the same as climbing the hill with a buddy, and we all know that. And Prophet found, before he thought of the bricks, he just was interested in how the perception of height changed when somebody came and stood beside, that they knew came and stood beside the person. He said, "This doesn't make any sense. That's ridiculous. Why does their visual perception change when somebody they know comes and stands beside us?" Because that's how the social brain works. It sees other people as a resource. So what Jim talks about is the most powerful way to regulate emotion and regulate your physiology is co-regulation with another person. Not the way we've thought about it almost exclusively in psychology is we see people in their skin. Even though we know the brain is social now, we see people in their skin, and we're concerned to teach them self-regulation. You're a therapist, you know about co-regulation. If you're a good EFT therapist, why? When someone's distressed or you ask them to take a risk, do you drop your voice and go slower and reflect what's going on for them and let them understand that this is hard for them just because you're a nice person? Because you're a sentimental person? No! Because you've learned EFT maybe, right? But because you're a bonding mammal, just like you know how to pick up a child and you put the child on your chest and you rock and you go, yes, yes, oh yes, yes, yes. And the child's heart rate starts to go down and the child's breathing changes and the child falls asleep on your chest. And nature is so brilliant. Just think about how brilliant this is, that nature's even made that rewarding for you too, even when it's 2 a.m. and you haven't slept. Because there's something about holding that baby on your chest that calms you down. And all your neurons go, ah, because you're a bonding animal. So we're talking about, so I'm not going to talk about abstract points like this again, right? But we're talking about, the whole science here is talking about the power of co-regulation, of regulating with other people, which is kind of the way our brain naturally works. Yes, we can regulate ourselves. In fact, but the point is most of us learn to do that with the help of other people as well. We can regulate ourselves. But what we're using in a therapy like EFT and in couples therapy is, if you like, we're teaching the couple to regulate each other's physiology and each other's emotions, particularly at moments of threat. That's in general EFT. Think how important that becomes with a trauma survivor. Think of the difference, for example, one of my couples, where because of what we've done in therapy, when the woman has a nightmare of her father and his friends molesting her, she wakes up and she touches her husband on the shoulder and she says to him, "It's come for me." And all he does, because he knows she's overwhelmed, she can't tolerate any information processing, he's silent. All he does is he turns in the bed and he opens his arms and she comes into his arms and he holds her and she goes to sleep. And she wakes up in the morning with a memory of being and taken care of when it comes for her, rather than what she used to do, which is feel like a stranger and like he was an alien, and she'd get up out of bed and go into the bathroom to cut herself because cutting herself, at least she was in control of that pain, and it felt more real than this nightmare that was taking her over. There'd be some relief in the cutting. Trouble with the cutting was she'd then be filled with shame the next morning, and she'd hide her body and herself for the next 2 weeks until it happened again. Think of the difference between turning to her husband. The other thing that I talk to people about is, we talk a lot about the toxicity of shame these days. And indeed, shame is toxic. It's toxic because the action tendency associated with the emotion of shame is to hide and withdraw from other people, and that makes you isolated. So it's toxic. But what I talk about is, as therapists, real good empathic therapists, we have perhaps a small 20-watt light bulb to shine down into a deep pit of someone's shame. The partner has a stadium floodlight. If you really want to shift a lifetime of shame, the best thing I know to do is couples therapy and turn that partner's stadium floodlight on. She or he's only got to do it about 5 times. And it's just transformational. Right? It's like when you show up and show who you are to the person you love, and you're sure that the person you love is going to run out of the room with disgust or call you a monster, and then you look up into their face and you see that they are weeping, and they lean towards you like this, and they're weeping because of your pain. Just think about that in terms of a corrective emotional experience for trauma. Whether you're a vet who's never told anyone that you're ashamed because you couldn't save your buddy's life and you're blaming him because of that, or whether you're an incest survivor who's somehow blaming yourself for the fact that you were, as Daddy said, you were a sexy little girl. Just think about what happens to you when you talk about this shame, you talk about what you're ashamed of, and you look up into the face of a loved one and you see compassion, caring, love, support. Tricky part is you have to be aware of the fact that people can't always take that in after a lifetime of shame. You've got to help them because they literally, it's foreign to them. So they're going to get confused and disorientated. So you have to be very emotionally present because you have to help them. You have to help them say, what do you see on her face? And they do things like, I don't know, because they're not used to taking in love. One of the saddest things about human beings is we need to practice everything. We need body memory for everything, even taking in love. And one of the saddest things you see in couples therapy, and you see it quite often in EFT, is somebody saying to their partner, love me, love me, love me, love me, love me. And then the person says, okay, here I am. And the person goes, ah! Well, I don't know, I'm not sure. What does this look like? I don't think so. Oh, no, let's go back to what we used to. Love me, love me, love me, love me. Right. That's sort of the whole story of some couples. They do that their whole life. Imagine that drama consuming your whole life. Mm-hmm. If you can't see it, you don't understand it, you can't shape it. If you see and understand the drama in love relationships, the emotional dramas, the needs, the longings, the fears, if you see and understand them, you can shape them. So love becomes not something that you fall into and fall out of, that you have no control over. It's sort of a mystical thing that happens. It's really just about frustrated sexual desire. No, I don't think so. Love becomes something you can understand as a survival code. You can understand it, and what you understand you can shape. And you can shape healing relationships where people can co-regulate their bodies and their emotions and find their emotional balance and know how to deal with the dragon in a way that leaves them whole and leaves them able to live their lives. Yeah? Okay, so what else have we got here? The nature of relationships. Yes, we understand what goes wrong in relationships. I think one of the big things about couples therapy was that we got obsessed with conflict. We said the problem is that people fight. No, everybody fights. Right? So people like my colleague John Gottman, who I have a huge amount of respect for, I mean, he really he saw in his research what we see in EFT and what attachment says, which is the issue is not that people fight. What happy, secure couples can do that makes them different from unhappy, insecure couples is that when they fight, they might see the other person as the enemy for a moment, but they don't stay there. They can find a way to turn back towards each other and reach for each other and repair the fight. Now, John talks about repairing the fight. I'm talking more about they can find a way to reach and become open, accessible, and responsive to each other so that they can re-engage. That's what we know, that makes the key difference between happy and unhappy couples. From an EFT point of view, the problem in distressed couples, traumatized or not, is not that they fight. The problem is how emotionally disconnected they are. If you like, the anger and the fighting is the inflammation. The virus is emotional disconnection. The virus is, I can't find you, I can't connect with you, I can't get you to respond to me. All you do is attack me. I can't find a way to be with you that's safe. If I open up to you, all I get is criticism. I hear that I'm a disappointment. Well, I call you and call you and call you, and you never answer. What am I supposed to do but scream? This is all about emotional disconnection. If you understand that's the problem, then you have a whole different map as a therapist than if you have a map that says that conflict is the issue, and what I've got to do is just give people conflict negotiation skills. Lots of luck with that. If I'm fighting dragons called isolation or isolation plus trauma, lots of luck teaching me conflict negotiation skills. Wrong channel, wrong time, they're irrelevant. And we're still teaching couple skills, even though the research says again and again and again, the latest research by Roge, R-O-G-G-E, again finds that really teaching couple skills doesn't work. They'll do it in your sessions, but it doesn't have any lasting impact. I invite you, if you don't believe that research, to think about, you're all skilled therapists, I invite you to think about how you are in your own arguments with your life partner. How many, when it's really hot, how many of your deep empathy, listening, and attunement skills do you use? You gotta be kidding. I actually have this little EFT therapist in my head. And so if I don't know, about once a year, it seems to me that me and my partner get caught in a doozy of some kind. And I've got this therapist in my head that says things like, don't say that. But I do. Because he's being outrageous. And I'm going to show him. And I'm going to win. And I'm going to prove my point. And anyway, right? So I say it. And then the therapist goes, oh dear, oh dear. But so that's what happens. And you all know that. You all know that there's a certain point when I've lost my emotional balance. You know, put it this way. You can be the most skilled tango dancer in the world. You can have the technique of a genius. If you lose your balance, it all goes out the window. Because when I'm messing about like this, I have to put my leg back there to stop falling down. I have no choice. So I can have all kinds of brilliant moves, but I can't execute them because I've lost my balance. So our idea about what goes wrong with couples, our idea about what this drama is all about is starting to change. Ted Houston, I talk about him every time I speak. It's almost like his research just sort of disappeared. It just kind of did the most amazing study. I talk about it in Love Sense, where he looked at newlyweds, and then for 15 years he followed them up. He went to their house, he talked to them, he gave them interviews, he gave them measures. And what he found was that there was only one thing that really predicted where these couples were 5 years later, 15 years later. And it wasn't whether they fought, or it wasn't even how they fought. it was what he called emotional responsiveness, which is, I think, the same thing that John Gottman's getting at when he talks about repair, and what we're getting at when we talk about being able to move into accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. Being able to turn and dance with somebody, tune into them, and move in synchrony with somebody. That's what we're talking about. So we're really starting to understand relationships in a different way. And we're starting to understand how important emotion is. It is the emotional signals that are the music of the dance of connection and disconnection. It is all about emotional signals. How can people dance tango and tune into each other? Because they're listening to the music. The music structures the whole dance, and you're both listening. So that's when you're moving together, right? But the trouble with distressed couples is that emotional music is all getting scrambled, and all they hear in the symphony is threat. And if you're a trauma survivor who's really vigilant for threat, you can put that on the ceiling. Then your brain says, here we are again. Here we are again in hopelessness and helplessness. Here we are again. But this time, I'm in hopelessness and helplessness with the person I rely on and with the person who's supposed to give me love. And that brings people into a dreadful place of despair. Of course, the soldiers tell the military psychologists that if their partner leaves them, they'll commit suicide. And it's time for the military psychologists to see that the answer to that is not more drugs. The answer to that is to find a good couples therapist. Right? So we have proven interventions such as EFT. I'm not going to talk to you a lot about EFT research in these 2 days. You can find them all on the ICEFT website. Right? But basically, we have studies that show that working in EFT couples therapy reduces symptoms of anxiety, PTSD, and depression. I think from the point of view of trauma, the most interesting one is Linda McLean's study that she did at the Women's Hospital in Toronto, where she actually did EFT where one partner was dying of cancer. And she went in and she did a short version of EFT. And that's facing the dragon. And what she found was that what the patients told her was that the interventions that she did, helping them come close and stand together and look at the fact that one person was going to lose their partner and the other person was going to die, was that it really seemed to help the dying person, come to terms with their loss and deal with what was happening to them. And it really, really helped the surviving person deal with that loss and go on in their life. So this is interesting. If you think about that as death and loss as the ultimate pain, I've actually had people in an audience say to me, but you're connecting with these people and you're teaching these people to be vulnerable and that it's okay to rely on this person in constructive dependency, and you're connecting these people. But then what happens when the other person dies? Isn't it interesting? We always think the other person's going to die before us. So what happens if the other person dies? Then it's dreadful. Then you've made them totally vulnerable. No. Any system that's a survival system is cleverer than that. The evidence is that securely attached people, of course they're devastated when they lose their partner. There's no way out of pain in human life. There's no way out of vulnerability. That's just the name of the game. Of course they're devastated, but all the research says that securely attached people who have had that connection heal faster, and they deal with grief and loss, even ultimate death of their own death or death of their partner. Let's go with death of their partner. They deal with it better. It really is better to have loved and lost than never to have lost at all. People understand what I'm saying? I'll give you a good example of that, because we do think of death and the threat of death as the ultimate trauma. In Love Sense, I've written this, it's in the last chapter. I have a friend in Ottawa, I've known her for a long time. She's quite a bit older than me, and her husband died. And she had a very, very hard time about that. And about 18 months after he died, we were having breakfast in Ottawa, which we do together. And she said to me, "Did you see the snow the other morning?" I said, yes. You know, when in this old city in winter, when you get these days when the big, huge, soft snowflakes come down, it's totally beautiful. And she says, yes. And Mags loved that. He loved that. And I said to him, I said, Mags, isn't this city beautiful? You just love this silent, silent white carpet falling all over the city. So I sort of went, and she said, it's okay, Sue, I don't have hallucination. She said, but these days what I find is that I talk to him. And it's like I'm coming back to life, and it hurts so much that I lost him, but I talk to him. I talk to him and I share beautiful things with him because he loved me, you see. And the love hasn't gone away. I still feel loved. And that's allowed me to come back and live again. That's the power of secure connection facing the most ultimate threat of all. What do religions talk about how to face death? Through compassion, through thinking of God as a loving figure who we go to, through loving other human beings, for being cared for when we're dying by other human beings. There's a movement in North America called Nobody Dies Alone. I put that in Love Sense too, which just looks at the fact that as human beings we are not supposed to die alone. We are supposed to die in the arms of another human being. So that's what we're talking about here, yeah? All right. So we have a new science of love. We understand the change process in EFT. We have empirically validated interventions. We understand how people start to change. In EFT, the people who change, who are changed at the end of therapy and who are to remain changed at follow-up, in EFT, the evidence is you need a good alliance with your therapist, yes, but the evidence is it's the people who can go into their softer emotions, keep their balance with their softer emotions, and then turn and connect with the partner and let the partner help them with those emotions in a mutual, reciprocal, secure connection. Those are the people that do the best in EFT and are stable at follow-up. It's an interesting one. What I just talked about also explains the fact that in EFT we don't really have that much problem with relapse. One of the big issues in couple therapy is people don't test their interventions. They come up with ideas and formulations and they don't test their interventions. So you just have their word for it that they work, right? They don't test their interventions. But the other big elephant in the room in couple therapy is the tested interventions, some of them, the relapse rates are horrible. Horrible. We don't have that problem in EFT. Why not? The first, and this is talking about the effect, trauma and the effect on the relationship. The first long-term follow-up of EFT was done by the Children's Hospital in Ottawa. We work with the parents of chronically ill children. Imagine the stress involved if you have a child who's got cystic fibrosis and they go into the hospital about once every 3 months, and each time you don't know whether they're going to come out. This is a recipe for a really distressed relationship and for clinical depression. And they divorce in droves and they have clinical depression in droves, yeah? So we took these couples and we gave them a short, basically I think it was 12 sessions of EFT, right, to help them deal with this situation, this ongoing trauma, and to help them deal with their relationship. The hospital did a 2-year follow-up, and I thought, well, that's going to be interesting because of all the couples we've ever worked with, those couples are probably most at risk for relapse. So if anybody's going to relapse, they're going to relapse. So I was expecting relapse, no relapse. Why? If you really think about it, all couples therapy should relapse. I mean, couples, relationships are complex. Life is complex, right? Relationships change. I mean, we do what? In EFT, we do 8 to 20 sessions. With trauma survivors, we might do 30 sessions. right? So in 30 hours, you're going to change something that people have been practicing for years, a dance they've been practicing for years, a way of dealing with their emotions, a way of seeing other people, their whole way of connecting in intimate relationships. You're going to change that in 30 hours that's going to stay. And going to stay, well, it's unlikely. And I want you to think about that. It's unlikely unless you plug in to the most powerful motivation system and deepest need that human beings have, and then get the partner to answer that need. Then maybe. So what those people, what they basically told us, and I'm going to put it into the image of the dragon, is, if the dragon is, my child is going to die and there's nothing I can do about it, even though I'm the best parent in the world, my child is going to die. Here comes the dragon. You reach, because you're a human being. That's just what your brain does. You reach. And what used to happen was you'd reach and you'd be all by yourself. And then the dragon looks huge, right? And the fight is overwhelming. But after these sessions of EFT, what couples told us is they'd reach and the other person's hand would be there and they'd stand and face this together. And so every time they did that, what happens to their relationship? It becomes stronger. And I thought, right. So when you face the dragon together, you're not just more able to face the dragon, your relationship becomes stronger. That makes sense. That's why they didn't relapse. Really interesting, right? So we know about in-session change. We have a new science of love, which gives us a new goal. The goal is not just for people to be friends or to have less conflict or to problem solve. The goal is secure emotional connection in EFT. That's the goal. And that's the kind of connection that helps you face dragons. In fact, that's actually the only way we ever face dragons, you know. One of the first people to ever study traumatic stress, I always say his name wrong, Cardinger. I think that's right. I think it was 1949. One of the first people to ever study traumatic stress said, the main thing that allows men to deal with the anxiety of battle is the bond with other soldiers. Well, yeah, we all know that. If you want to stop war forever, just change our agreement and insist that men go out and fight one-to-one or by themselves with the enemy. Wars would end instantly. Everybody would say, well, I'm not doing that. You know, I'll go with Pete and Sam, you know, I'm not going out there all by myself. Are you kidding me? Like, I don't want to fight that. Oh, that man that's really nasty. I'm not right. And wars would end. Things like Band of Brothers. Have you watched that on the television? Right? Fighting men know that, which is why it makes an awful lot of sense if you don't want soldiers to commit suicide to not break up those fighting units when they come stateside, wouldn't it? But guess what? They do, don't they? How silly is that one, I wonder? But if you don't understand that we need these bonds to face dragon, and when we face dragons with people, the bond gets stronger. Okay, as a result of our understanding of relationships in this new science, we can use couple therapy in new ways. We can use it to help people deal with heart attacks, right? We can use it to help people deal with diabetes. We can use it for individual problems to help create a healing environment for individual problems like depression, anxiety, and PTSD, which is what we're talking about here. We can heal relationships and then create relationships that heal. But in order to do that, we have to really understand what these relationships are all about, that they're an ancient, wired-in survival code. All right, how are we doing? Oh, goodness me. All right. Well, I always end up behind, but that's all right because we catch up. So before we go for coffee, I just want to give you one quote I was supposed to start with. Mozart said, "Love keeps the heart from the abyss." Love keeps the heart from the abyss. Okay, the empathic responsiveness of the therapist creates safety. The goal is to guide partners into this responsiveness with each other. Empathic responsiveness, which is the essence of secure connection. So the therapist becomes a surrogate attachment figure. So your job as an EFT therapist is to create this safe haven, secure base in your session and to be the image of a secure attachment figure. Whether your client can take that in at any point in time or not, that is your job to offer that. To offer what a mother offers. If for some reason this image is coming up these days, imagine a mother who walks a little toddler down to the lake for the first time, a lake. Think what a lake must look like to a little toddler. We say it's just a lake, you can swim in it, but to a little toddler, it's this huge body of water. It's strange, it's new, it's terrifying. Some people who you're going to work with feel that way about their own body, about their own emotions, about fear itself. Fear itself can create such horrible sensations in your body that you're actually terrified of actually fear itself, feeling those sensations. Anybody know what I mean? I developed an airplane phobia a few years ago. And what started to hit me was, it really helped me when I started to realize I wasn't actually afraid of the plane falling from the sky. It had gotten to the point where I was actually afraid of all these horrible sensations of the fear when I flew because I felt really awful all the time. Right? So that helped a lot. Then I started to understand that somehow it was my own body that was giving me the sensations that was the problem, not flying per se, because I didn't actually believe that the plane was going to fall from the sky. Right? So although I must say when you fly there is something about control. One of the reasons I fly United is that some EFT therapist has gone and trained those guys. Have you ever noticed how they talk to you? They never say, "Oh, hi, we're going through a bit of turbulence, but it'll be all right." They don't say that. They say, "Hi, everybody. We're just going to have a few bumps here. But I'll have you on the ground real soon. I'm your captain. This is the friendly skies. And what's he saying? You're safe, you're safe." I think somebody's taught those dudes to do that. Somebody's taught them, right? It's really, really interesting, and it calms you down. So fear itself, and I'm now losing my thread. What am I talking about here? Yeah. Fear itself can be terrifying. Your body can be terrifying. Your thoughts can be terrifying. A situation can be terrifying. And what we do in EFT is we bring the therapist in as the co-regulator of your client's affect. The tricky part is there's two of them. And while you're calming him down, she's getting ticked at you for abandoning her because her trigger in her family was that nobody paid attention to her. So after a while, that's not a problem because you create an alliance and she understands that you are going to turn to her. And she also starts to understand that even when you're talking to him, you have her needs and goals in mind. Secure attachment is knowing that you exist in somebody else's mind. That's Peter Fonagy. Secure attachment is knowing you exist in somebody else's mind. That's why we love it when people remember our birthday, when they send us notes, right? Oh, I exist in this person's mind, right? So you are a co-regulator, and in the beginning, you'll have to deal with that lady getting angry at you, and you say, "Yes, I understand. I did indeed just spend the last 5 minutes talking to your partner, and I understand that you're really concerned that I'm not just paying attention to him, and that I'm going to make the effort to really understand you and hear where you're coming from. And I understand that, and I would feel that way too. And I am going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to listen to both of you, and then I'm going to help you reach for the kind of relationship you want, so that you're always going to have that certainty that you'll be listened to. What am I doing? I'm co-regulating her, I'm calming her down, I'm saying to her, I'm safe, I got ya. I'm also saying, will you please shut up and let me talk to your partner? But I'm not saying it like that, right? I'm saying, I got ya. Because if I don't calm her down, if I give her reasons why I'm going to talk to her, it's not going to work. If I give her my theory, if that's not going to work. I have to go and co-regulate her. She's getting alarmed. So you are like a surrogate attachment figure. You're like the mother that takes a little toddler down to the lake, and you don't say, it's a lake, in you go, right? Which seems to me, you're laughing, but it seems to me that a lot of therapy that I see people doing is just like that. Let me tell you, you tell me your dysfunctional thoughts, and I'll tell you why they're stupid. It's a lake. Jump. Right? What? So what we do is we go and we hold. Look what a good mother does. She holds a hand and she drops her voice and she goes, oh, it's a lake. Yes, it is. Oh, look at the lake. Oh, it's a lake. Yes, it is. Yes, it's a lake. You hang out there for a while. You don't go, it's a lake. You go, so a lot of it's pacing, timing, tuning into somebody, holding their affect, co-regulating them the way a good attachment figure does. You hold and you say, let's go towards the lake. Oh, what's that like? Oh, we don't like it. Right, okay, so we'll just go back here for a bit, okay? Because it's, oh, look at the froggy in the lake. Oh, now let's go again. Oh, now I'm playing, but I'm not. I'm saying, you have to get that for some people to even look inside and calm down and really tune into their own bodies and their emotion is a threat. They'll tell you, I'm going to drown if I do that. It's overwhelming if I do that. I'm going to meet the dragon if I do that. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to die. I'm going to have a meltdown and my partner will see me and she will hate me and despise me. These are the basic universal fears people have. If I touch this pain, it will go on forever. If I touch this pain, it will kill me. If I touch this pain, it will totally scramble me, so I'll lose my tenuous hold on my sense of self. Any control that I have, it will be gone. And everyone will hate me. I'll be falling through space. And so you say, yes, I understand. Take my hand, and let's just look at this together. Take one step with me, and then we'll stand and we'll look at it. Because I'm not going to let you fall. That's right. And that's what a good attachment figure does. And then gradually the mother says, oh, put your toe in the lake. Oh, the water feels good. It's okay, look, you survived. Wow, you survived. The lake didn't come and grab you. You didn't drown. It's just the same. When people are dealing with threat, and your job is to tune into that threat and say to them, it's okay. It is a threat for you. I understand. And if you don't understand the threat, work harder. Because that's your job. If you see terror and fear on somebody's face, they're afraid. If they can't put it into words, you've got to be willing to get real curious and stay there until you get it. Till you get it like I get that table's hard. Not till you get it as an abstract idea. Right? You've got to get the reality of what this threat is for this person. Right? So you stay and you get curious and you let them look at the threat and you offer your hand and you talk about how hard it is for you to take your hand and you hold them and you take one step towards it and then you look at the threat again. This is good EFT. Sometimes when you talk about emotionally focused therapy, people get confused. They think you're talking about ventilation. They think you're talking about catharsis. Catharsis comes from the Greek word for diarrhea. So nobody ever, this is controlled. This is a controlled, if you like, you can think of it as exposure, but I don't like that because then that puts us into a whole nother frame of more cognitive behavioral therapies do something called prolonged exposure. But in a way it is exposure, but it's exposure in the way a mother exposes a child to a new or terrifying stimulus and stays with that child and processes that child's emotion, right? That's just good mothering. We sort of like, for us, it's natural to do that with kids because we see and accept their vulnerability. But somehow it's harder for us to see and accept other human beings' vulnerability and our own vulnerability as adults. To accept the fact that, you know, yes, adults are stronger, we have more resources, right? But on another level, we all have this vulnerability and we only have so many ways of doing it. The difference in the end between adults and kids in terms of attachment is that you have the cognitive ability to carry your attachment figures around with you in your mind. Little kids need the mother there all the time. They need the touch. You carry your attachment figures around in your mind. Mario Michelanza did an incredible study on Israeli prisoners of war, men who some of them had been in solitary confinement in a small cell where they couldn't stand up for 4 years, if you can imagine. And he wanted to look at the men who not only survived that, but were able to go out and grow as human beings. And he talked to them, and what he found was that those men had good relationships with somebody outside, often a partner, and that they would actively use those relationships to, sometimes in terms of imaginary encounters, to deal with their terror. So he describes a man who would say, I would say to myself every morning, I couldn't tell it was morning because the cell was dark, but I listened for certain noises and I decide that these noises were morning, and every morning I'd sit in a certain place in my cell. He creates a ritual, and I'd close my eyes to be with my wife, and I'd think of her face, and I'd imagine her touching me, and I'd think about all the beautiful times we had together, and I'd keep her alive for as long as possible, and I'd let my body feel her, and I'd listen to her voice, and I'd imagine all these times, and then I would say to her, I'm not going to die in this cell. I'm coming home to you, and you'll be there waiting for me, and that's why I didn't die. And she was. That's an adult using the representation of an attachment figure as safe haven, secure base. Little kids can't do that. By the way, people of faith do that with their image of God. You know, and if you talk to military chaplains will tell you, I remember being in San Antonio, Texas. Catherine, I met you, that's when I met you, wasn't it? San Antonio, Texas, and talking to all these military chaplains and them saying, you know, the movies don't show you because when men are under fire, everyone's screaming. They don't show you that on the Rambo movies. You know, and when it really gets hot, everyone's screaming. They're screaming for their attachment figures. They're screaming for God, their partner, or their mother. That's right. Because when we're human beings under threat, those are the places we go. But you as an adult go there in your mind. You still use that resource. What did everyone do on 9/11 in Ottawa? In our institute, all therapy stopped. We had a television brought out into the waiting room, and people were watching the television, crying and calling their partners and calling their fathers and calling their priest. That's what people were doing. They were watching it, everyone was crying together, and then they were calling the people they loved. That's built into your bones, right? So as an EFT therapist, you take some of that on. You go into that wired-in system that we have that's as old as we are as a race, and you go in there and you start to co-regulate. You start to bring people out of the hopelessness and helplessness of a really negative cycle where they're either abandoned and rejected the whole time. That's what you do. And also, if there's another drag, if there's a real trauma in the room, you start to put yourself between the trauma and the person. You become the attachment figure. And for that, by the way, you need to keep your own emotional balance. You need to be able to be balanced yourself. And if you can't do that, you have to recognize you're losing your balance, and you have to go out and get some support from a caring other, from another therapist. In EFT, what we try to do is we set up a community of therapists, an active community of therapists. That's why we go around and set up these communities. Wonderful people. People are doing it here, are they not? Who's starting the EFT community here? Why don't you guys stand up just for a minute? You-hoo-hoo. Yay! You go to other therapists for help if you're losing your balance. If you're going to be this co-regulator, this surrogate attachment figure, you have to be emotionally present. You have to, I'll say that again, you have to be emotionally present. Years and years ago, I can remember going for therapy around a very specific issue, and the therapist came very highly regarded, and after 3 sessions, I said to him, "You're a very kind man, and you've said some useful things, and thank you very much. I'm not coming back." And he says, "What do you mean you're not coming back?" I said, "I'm not coming back." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because you sit too far away from me." He sits where you are. See all the space between us? And he said, "I've done therapy for years and nobody's ever told me that." I said, "I believe you, but I'm telling you, you're too far away from me. I can't go where I need to go. I don't feel safe. You're too far away." Now, what's really interesting is he didn't offer to come closer. He didn't offer to move his chair. People say, "How close do you need to be?" Personally, for me, this is not necessarily true for you if you can create emotional connection without it. I need to be close enough that if I reach forward, I can touch people. On the knee, on the shoulder. I need to be close enough to touch because I use touch. Some people aren't comfortable with this. You have to be comfortable. I was born in an English pub. Everybody touched everybody. Right? So I'm fine with it, and my experience is people don't misinterpret it. If I'm fine with it, other people, and of course I'm sensitive when I do it. I mean, if I reach out to touch somebody and they go back, I don't keep going, right? But touch is one way of soothing and staying there. You have to be emotionally present. People can feel that. They pick it up. Your social brain picks up the cues on another person's face in 100 milliseconds. And in another 300 milliseconds, the muscles in your face have started to imitate what you see on the other person's face, and the mirror neurons in your brain give you the feeling in your body of what you see on this person's face. That was necessary for us to become social animals and to predict each other's intentions so we could come together and cooperate and create tribes and villages and support each other and have each other's backs. But think about this. So, if you're not emotionally present, or if you're getting irritated, you're getting angry, people pick it up. People pick it up instantly. So then you might as well be transparent and say, "I'm sorry, I'm getting really confused here. And somehow we keep getting into this dance and it's getting stuck, and I'm finding I'm getting sort of annoyed, which is crazy. But I guess that's how you feel. You get annoyed too when this dance takes over your relationship." And I'm assuming they're picking it up anyway, so I might as well be transparent. Right? But I have to be able to be emotionally present. So I'm going to talk to you about Carl in a minute, because one of the issues with Carl is that in the beginning I was having a real hard time being emotionally present with him. This is the value statement of EFT. Resolve to be tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant with the weak and the wrong. Sometime in your life, you will have been all of these. This is we are all turkeys in the same turkey soup therapy. Not I am an expert guru who has it so together, and you are a client, so you don't. Let me tell you how to fix yourself. That's not this kind of therapy, right? Maybe there are times when that kind of therapy works, but I don't know how to do that kind of therapy. So my perception is it's much better if you want people to look at their vulnerability and deal with it in a different way, for you to join them and sit beside them in their blocks, in their vulnerabilities, in the places that they get stuck, in the places that are terrified. You've got to be able to tune in and meet them there before you turn and say, well, now let's take a step to the left and go somewhere else. You've got to be able to meet them there. Otherwise, they don't feel safe enough to explore, and they won't follow you when you take the step, no matter how tiny it is. They won't follow you if they don't feel like you're beside them. Just like the little child looking at the lake won't follow the mother when the mother steps forward if he doesn't feel like the mother's there and understand that he's afraid. So this is taking sort of a Rogerian approach and infusing it with our understanding of human beings, how the human emotional system, nervous system works, how we can be co-regulated by other people. But Rogers basically said, your job as a therapist is to give unconditional positive regard. Your job is to find the perfect logic in how people are. That how they are right now makes sense, it's helped them survive. Your job is to believe in them and believe in that they can change. Your job is to believe they can grow. That's just your job. And if you're having a problem because somebody's really ticking you off or frustrating, then that's your problem. You've got to go and get some help with that. And the perfect place for that is your colleagues, right? Which is why a loving, learning community has really, really been part of how EFT has grown and developed, because we all get stuck in that. So the most basic intervention in EFT is empathic reflection. Every other intervention I do is an empathic reflection. I reflect constantly. For one thing, it helps me stay grounded. I just reflect what I see. I reflect what I see. And they feel heard, and when you feel heard and seen, you calm down. And to be heard and seen and not judged and empathized with, please let's not minimize how powerful that is for people. What a powerful calming and healing effect just that has, right? So empathic reflection creates safety. It focuses the therapist because you reflect some things, not others. It slows down processing. The thing about emotion, I've never understood people saying emotion is illogical. I've never really met a real illogical emotion in my life. The issue with emotion from a regulation point of view is it's fast. It's fast, and it has an impact on your body before your mind has even caught up and made sense of it. And if you're a trauma survivor, that can be very distressing indeed. You suddenly lose control of your body, right? So what do we do then? Constantly with emotion, we slow it down. We slow it down. We validate it, we slow it down, and we normalize it. We say, of course you felt that way, you're a human being. Absolutely. And if I really want to do it fast with somebody who's going into shame or fear, I'll use me. I think it's training tape in re-engaging withdrawers. The man says to me, I'm not going to turn and tell her about this feeling that I have of vulnerability because she'll despise me. She'll think I'm weak. She'll think I'm pathetic. And I say, I really understand. I say, but you know, this feeling that you have, I mean, we all have that, don't we? And he looks at me like, do we? So I say, I have that feeling. I have that feeling when I'm in a fight with my partner. The therapist beside me has that feeling. All those people in that room have that feeling. That's wired into our brain. That's just human. What am I doing? I'm normalizing and validating. Because the other thing, when we're in pain, and again, especially when we've been traumatized, we feel there's something wrong with us. And we should be able to deal with this differently. We should be stronger. We should be able to cope with this dragon. Right? And if people know how totally vulnerable we are, they will turn away from us and despise us. So what does a good surrogate attachment figure do about that? The good surrogate attachment figure says, yes, it's scary. And this is the way we human beings are. We human beings get scared, that's right. And I'm with you in this. It's normal, it makes sense. We validate it, we stay with it, we reflect it. Right? Then the person can feel it. The other thing we do when we reflect is we organize and order it, we distill it. Chaotic emotion is terrifying. How do you know there's one way of measuring secure attachment, where, and one way of doing it is you can talk to people about their past using something called the AAI. It's an interview about how you were with your parents, how you see your past attachment figures. And how do they rate attachment? They don't rate it on what you say, the content. There's a real lesson about EFT here. They rate it on the process. They rate it on how you talk about your emotion and what happened to you as a child. Here's a securely attached person talking. When I was a child, were people there for me, and were there bad things happen to me? Oh, well, things got pretty bad at one point. My dad left and my mom got this boyfriend, and he was pretty scary. And there was one night when he sort of went off the rails and he started throwing things around, and I started screaming and it got really scary. And for a while I was real angry at my mom because I don't feel she understood and she didn't come in and support me. But the way I understood it is that she was scared too. And there was a rift there between us, but after a while we were able to turn and we were able to talk about it. And that was pretty scary for me. And for a while I had a hard time around men, but my mom and I, we dealt with it, and it still hits me sometimes, but basically I can handle it. Now, never mind the content, listen to me. Da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I've got my emotional balance, I'm making sense, I'm coherent, I'm putting things together coherently. Now, never mind trauma, here's anxious attachment, which is what happens when people are unpredictable when you're young and they don't always give you safe haven when you need it. What happened to you when you're young? What happened to me when I was young? Well, first of all, my mother had these crazy boyfriends. She had this crazy boyfriend. This guy came home and he got really angry with me. I got really upset. And I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk. This is really difficult. I don't know why you ask me these kinds of questions. But, he was a creep. He was a complete creep. And she didn't do anything. And I've told her, and I've told her, and I've told her. I've asked her to talk about me, but she never will. Listen to the chaos. Listen to the narratives. There's no coherent narrative. There's no ability to order, organize, and distill your experience and come out in a way that you are constructing it in a way that makes sense and leaves you with your emotional balance. That's anxious attachment. Avoidant. Listen to the process. EFT is process orientated. Don't get sucked down the content tube. It's how people deal with their emotions, how they engage with other people, how they face the dragon. That's what's important here. The interpersonal processes and the emotional processes is how they do it that leaves them crippled and unable to face the dragon, not the fact that the dragon is there, right? So don't get caught in the content. Avoidantly attached folks who've experienced that other people aren't there for them, other people are dangerous, or they're alone, inevitably alone. Other people are either the source of danger, or best, they just leave them alone, they neglect them. What does that sound like? Bad things in my childhood. No, not really. I was fine. I was fine. Oh, of course, there was the time when, my mom brought that crazy guy home and he trashed the place and I thought he was going to kill me. That was pretty hard, but, I'm fine with that. I'm fine. There's really no problem with it. I'm just fine. Well, it doesn't make sense, does it? He says, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. There's no coherence there. I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. Of course, there was this trauma, but really it was nothing. I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. So there's these little islands of vulnerability which are sealed off and minimized and that the person never touches. The point about that one is the person's got to work really hard all their lives to stay away from those things. A huge amount of energy goes into pushing that to the side and suppressing it. Huge amount of energy. And let's just look at it in terms of resources. My colleague Jim Cohn would say, if you're suppressing all that stuff in your life and all those sensitivities and all those feelings, if you're doing that, it's going to take like something like 70% of the glucose going to your brain. So you really don't have very much in order to do things like tune into your partner and listen to them. You just don't have the resources. You're too busy pushing all this stuff down. Right? Which is why avoidance and numbing, the tricky part with avoidance and numbing, and this comes up in studies of PTSD, is it's a total trap. You think it's the solution to hurting, and it looks like the solution. The trouble is it's so costly because if you're shutting down and shutting everything out, nothing new can happen. You can't have any new corrective experiences to see the dragon as really just 3 feet tall, not 100 feet tall. You can't, if you're always doing this and not looking at the dragon, you're using all your energy to do this. You never get the corrective experience of holding someone's hand, admitting you're scared, and then looking at the dragon and seeing the dragon is only 3 foot high. You don't get the corrective experience. So here I'm talking about attachment styles, but I want you to get a feel for how we have certain ways of processing emotion and dealing with our affect that can leave us being able to make coherent sense of our experience or not. And what I do when I go into somebody's experience that they're not quite comfortable with things like empathic reflection, as I listen, I lend them my prefrontal cortex. I lend them my emotional balance. I stand beside them, and as I listen and reflect, I order their experience. I help them make sense of it. I distill it. I say, that bit doesn't fit here, and it's not important. Let's stay with this bit. I distill it, I order it, I organize it. Then the person can make coherent sense of it. Then they can look at it with me and get their balance. So empathic reflection sounds like nothing. You know, people used to accuse Carl Rogers of just repeating things. And what he said is a good reflection is not a repetition, it's a revelation. And it's a way of holding people. And if you do it with your regular clients, when you have a trauma survivor, you do it all the time, all the time. You hold people, you reflect their experience, and as you order it, you make it possible. You take them into their window of tolerance with it. You allow it to be tolerable because you've ordered it and made sense of it. It's no longer chaotic. Everybody with me? Okay. I like to stress this one because I feel like somehow we still, everyone's coming up with new strategies and new techniques. And this is a very, very basic, simple one that you can get very, very good at. And that can help you create safe haven, secure base in your session for your clients. Okay. This is a picture somebody sent me from the Burning Man Festival in the Nevada desert. And I just liked it very much, and they called it love. What is interesting is the two small, vulnerable children trying to reach for each other. From a point of view of a trauma workshop, I want you to notice that both the vulnerable children are in steel cages, and that the steel cages can be seen sometimes as a protection, but actually there's a certain point where they become a prison. So, and this I think reflects to one of the quotes from Bessel van der Kolk's book on The Body Keeps Score that I really liked. What he basically said is, more than anything, Being able to feel safe with other people is fundamental to mental health, more than anything. So then why don't we do couples therapy and put it as a regular part of trauma treatment? Being able to be safe with other people is fundamental to mental health. But I'm going to add a piece to that. It's not just being able to be safe with other people. It's being able to have at least one person on this planet who will come when you call, who you can be safe with, even in these key moments of vulnerability, when the dragon comes for you. All right. I think I'm going to go past that, and we'll do that tomorrow. We're going to do an exercise. No, we won't. We'll do it. If you've listened to me before, you'll know this piece. This is trying to capture the essence of relationship distress. Do you love me? Please notice she asks, do you love me, with a hammer in her hand. So the other person focuses on the threat, right? Because tone of voice and facial expression is the most basic communicator. It's the music of the interactional dance. So if you ask me, do you love me, in a voice that tells you I'm dangerous, you're going to back off. And that's what he does. He says, of course I do. How many times have I told you? Flat, rational answer to highly emotional question. Wrong channel, miss. So she gets upset and she says, well, it doesn't feel like it. And she starts to tear. And in another session, this lady said, even when I cry, he's mean and he's not there. That's true. When you cry, he's not there. But you're not paying attention to the fact that at least 80% of the time, you go towards him with a hammer in your hand. So, a few tears don't really cancel that out. But she doesn't see that. She doesn't see the hammer in her hand. It's her desperation coming out. She ups her voice, right? She says, well, it doesn't feel like, and he says, well, maybe you have a problem then. I can't help it if you don't feel loved. If you don't have an attachment frame, if you don't understand that isolation is inherently traumatizing for human beings, disconnection hurts. Nancy Eisenberger, rejection from other people is processed in the same part of the brain and exact same way as physical pain. Both of them are threats. Your body doesn't really distinguish. Rejection from someone you care about and depend on is a danger cue. Stepping on a nail the pain from stepping on a nail is a danger cue. Your body doesn't really distinguish. When somebody says I hurt after reading Nancy Eisenberger's research, I take it literally. It's in their body. It's not a metaphor when somebody says I hurt. So if you don't have an attachment frame, you could say, well, this man's, that was a bit mean. I mean, you have a problem then. That wasn't very nice. But, she goes crazy after that. So she must have a personality disorder, or she must lack communication skills, or she must be projecting onto him and acting out something of her past. No. Let's just stay with what's in front of our face. You stay with the process that's in front of you in EFT. Let's just stay with what's in front of our face. He basically says, if you hurt, it has nothing to do with me. If you hurt, you're on your own, sweetie pie. I'm separate from you. It's not my problem. You can hurt, and I'm over here a long way away from you. It's irrelevant. From an attachment point of view, he has just blown up the bond between them. Your pain doesn't hurt me. Your joy doesn't impact on me. We have no connection. So you better believe he's just set off an atomic bomb in the relationship. If you don't get attachment, you don't get that. And then you don't understand why she ups the ante. She's going to up the ante. She basically says to him, oh yeah? I can't have any impact on you, just watch me. I've put the hammer down and I've got a sledgehammer. Here I come. So she says, right, so it's my problem, is it? Just mine. right? Nothing to do with you. We're separate. Nothing to do with your 10 feet thick walls. You're an emotional cripple. You've never felt really emotional in your life. She said, oh yeah? Well, I'll use the real weapon I have. I'll tell you you're unlovable. There's something wrong with you. And that will get your attention. Then I'll have an impact on you. Because in an attachment relationship, any response is better than none. And if you don't understand what I just said, you don't get the things that people do to each other just to get the other person to respond, to know that they have an impact and they matter to the other person. Any response is better than none. So she whams him, right? Imagine trying to teach her communication skills at this point. She would wham you, that's what would happen. She would wham you. He says, and what does he say? He says, I refuse. I refuse to dance. I refuse to talk to you when you get like this, so irrational, there's no point. She says, right, this is what always happens. You put up your wall, you go, I see till I get tired and give up. Then after a while you want sex, you decide I'm not so bad after all. He says, there's no point in talking to you. This is a shooting gallery. Notice, people talk about disconnection in terms of life and death. Why? Because they're sentimental fools? No, because of the way their brain is structured. You have a mammalian brain, and your mammalian brain, when it was being formed, knew, like you know that your blood goes through your veins, that if you called and no one came, you died. And human beings, they're young, are vulnerable for longer than any other species on this planet. So, you know, he's basically using shooting gallery. He's saying, you're coming for me. This is a dangerous situation. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to shut you out. I'm going to refuse. And you're trying to kill me. This is a shooting gallery. People talk about connection and disconnection in terms of life and death, in terms of trauma, right? Please notice that what I'm, on another level, what I'm talking about here is that your habitual way of engaging other people, especially at moments of vulnerability and danger, your habitual way of engaging other people, right, actually structures your inner world. And your inner world, how you put your emotions together and put out those signals, structures those relationships. There's an amazing feedback loop here. And I'm going to show you the other one, really to stress something. Shutting down is something you see a lot in trauma. People shut down and numb out because it's the only way to survive. And in the moment, it allows them to survive, so it's good and it's rational. And staying there will cost them their life and their relationships. Because when you shut down, and we call these people in relationships withdrawers, but I'm asking you to think about it on another level in terms of they're withdrawing not just from their partner, but from their own emotions, their own awareness, to deal with a dragon sitting in the middle of their life. You shut down, you shut yourself in. You can't reach anybody and they can't reach you. You shut the other person out, and what was a protection for you becomes a prison. And, you know, for the therapist to understand that, you can't teach somebody that. They have to experience it. They have to experience that they're so numbed out that even when their partner turns to them with love and care and tenderness, it bounces off. And the therapist replays that moment again and again and again, so that they start to be aware that, yes, they can't take anything in, and then they begin to feel sad, and the numbing starts to move, because the longing for that love and connection is wired into their mammalian brain, right? But for a lot of folks, especially traumatized folks, numbing is they'll tell you, it's just the way I am. Or it's the only way to cope. No, it's not just the way they are. They can be other ways if you calm them down and co-regulate and help them look at the dragon, whatever the dragon is, emotional isolation, abandonment, rejection, what happened to them in Iraq, whatever the dragon is. The point is, numbing leaves you without any, it leaves you standing still and immobile and completely shut off from your own emotions, being able to play music to your partner and from your partner's caring. Okay, so what do we do in EFT? We look within at how partners construct their emotional relatedness using Rogerian interventions, and between at how partners engage each other. And those two things are in a feedback loop. John Bowlby was way before his time. John Bowlby, who knew Bertalanffy, who wrote the original book on systems theory, what John Bowlby basically said was, there is an inner ring and feedback loop of emotional processing that you relate to your emotion in a particular way, and it sets you up to continue to relate in that way. And it sets up what happens when you express those emotions in a way that you keep doing that. You become used to processing your emotions in a particular way. And he says there's an outer ring, an outer feedback loop of other people. How you send signals to another person sets them up to respond to you in a particular way. Then they respond to you in a particular way that feeds back into how you process your emotion. Right? I know I'm going to hear rejection from you, so I never ask you for anything without an edge in my voice, because I'm going to protect myself. You think I'm going to let you hurt me, so I process my emotion where I'm sensitive to any slight, and the minute I hear a slight, I'm going to react defensively, and I'm going to show you that you can't hurt me. And the way I process my emotion, so I turn and interact with you, and sure enough, what does it pull from you? It pulls anger or distance. And then I say, there you are, you see? I knew I had to stay away and watch for danger and attack you whenever it came and put my walls up. The two things go together. How you send signals to another person sets them up into a response pattern. Their response pattern feeds back into how you process your own emotion and send signals. And we work with that in EFT. We work to reprocess and expand emotional responses, to go past surface affect, defensive ways of dealing with emotion, and go further. We allow that we say, yes, you're angry right now. You have your anger right at hand. It's the place you always go, and it protected you in your past. I really understand that your anger is sort of just the place you... Says this firefighter said, emotion. Emotion? What do you mean, anger? You mean anger? Right? Yeah, yeah, anger, okay. So, you know that one. You know anger, you have your anger right there for you, right? But then when you use that voice with your partner, she moves away and you get angrier. He says, yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah, that's how it works, yeah. But once you start going and saying, how does that make you feel that she moves away like that? Make me feel, well, I don't know. And he looks down and his face drops and his mouth drops and he starts brushing his hand like this. He might not have the words, but you can see sadness all over his face. So all you have to do is go and expand the anger into the softer feelings. You say, could you help me right here, right now? I asked you what it was like for you to see her being distant. And what you did was you took a deep breath and you looked down and your face dropped and you started stroking your hand. Could you help me? I have the feeling that something else is happening. It's not anger right now, right? What is that you're feeling? He says, well, I don't know, really, I don't know. And he starts to tear. And I say, oh, and now you have, and this is, I've got an exercise about this later, but this man actually, you start to tear, and this man said, no, I don't, no, I'm not tearing. I said, oh, okay, so your eyes start to water, and you push it away, right, because he feels, I think, oh, he's ashamed of crying in front of me, right, he's a firefighter, so you put, but something's happening. What happens? She turned her chair, and she looked up. I give him the cue again. Here's the cue again. Here's how your body moves. Here's what happened. And he'll well, maybe, what is that word you said? Yeah, I think I'm sad. Yeah, I think I'm sad. Yeah! So what have I just got? I've gone past the surface. I've expanded his awareness from just anger or nothing to sadness, yeah? So I do that by staying there with it. We expand emotional responses in order to change the music in the dance. What's the fastest way to change how people dance? Change the music. Change the emotional music. Also, if you don't change the emotional music, lots of luck teaching them to dance waltz when they're playing tango. It's really difficult. You have to be able to change the emotional music. We do that to create new kinds of interactions. What kind of new interactions? We do it to foster secure bonding. What does that mean? The essence of a secure bond is that both people are mutually, reciprocally accessible, responsive, and engaged with each other. A-R-E, accessible, responsive, and engaged. Are you there for me? I talk about this in Hold Me Tight. The million-dollar question is, are you there for me? Especially when dragons are coming for me, especially when I'm vulnerable. Can I call for you? It's hard to do if I'm really sure you're not going to be there and I'm just going to feel rejected again. Can I call for you? Are you there for me? So we're trying to move people into being open, accessible, responsive, tuning in, wanting to respond to the other person's emotions, and engaged with that person, close. That's what we're trying to do. That's what a secure attachment figure is. So I'm going to speed up here, guys. Otherwise, I'm going to be late with all my agenda here. If you watch an EFT therapist, over whether the EFT therapist is in stage 1, starting to de-escalate negative patterns, and we'll talk about this in a moment, or in stage 2, having de-escalated negative patterns and created a certain safe platform, now going into helping people take risks and restructure engagement so they can be really connected with each other, or in stage 3, when you're consolidating people and getting them ready to leave you. In those stages, the EFT therapist might be more intense, or might stay with something longer, or push people to take risks more, right? So the way they do the interventions will vary, but the bottom line is they're always doing, in every session, they're always doing this, and we call it the EFT tango. It's the basic steps. In any dance, there's a basic step that then you go off from. Right? In tango, it's a basic square that you do. It's a set of steps you do. That's how you learn. This is a basic tango that the EFT therapist is always doing. What do you do? Now, you might do it a little slower with a trauma survivor. You might stay there a little longer, but you're still doing this. Dragon or no dragon, you're still doing this. You reflect and distill present process. What is in front of you? EFT happens in the present. If something's very powerful in the past, it will come into the present. Emotion has the power to do that. That's one of the things we don't like about PTSD. When somebody has a flashback, they are back in Nam. They're not thinking about being back in Nam. They are back in Nam in your office. When somebody has a flashback of incest, they are back there. It is a present thing. So you stay with present process. Give you an example of that. If you would like to look at a transcript of me dealing with a woman who was incestuously abused, who has a meltdown when her partner turns to her and lovingly says, "Come and be with me, let me hold you," because those are the exact words that her father used to use before he put her on his knee and started abusing her. If you want to look at that, in the Journal of Marriage and Family Therapy, I believe it's in 1989, it might be 1988, but I think it's 1989, there's an article about using EFT for trauma by myself, Johnson, and Lynn Williams Keeler. You can find it on the ICEFT website, the full reference, but it's in the Journal of Marriage and Family Therapy, And I set up that interaction, and she goes into a flashback, and I go in and I reflect, present process, I reflect what's happening. What's happening? I go low and slow. I co-regulate. What's happening here? Your partner turned and said this, and something happened. And she starts to talk in a little girl voice. Something happened. You went back into being very small, very vulnerable. What happened here? Something happened, yeah? A male voice saying, come and be with me, brought you back into being small. And she tells me what's going on a little bit, and I reflect it, and I stay with her, and I hold her. Say, yes, this is so hard for you. Even caring is dangerous. Even someone offering to care is dangerous. Your brain says, it's dangerous, it's dangerous, it's going to happen again. You reflect, you put it into words so she can breathe and look at it. That's what's happening. And then I ground her. I say, but you're here with me right now. You're here with me, Sue. I use her name a lot. You're right here with me. Can't remember it right now, but let's say it's Mary. Mary, you're here. You're here, Mary, with me. And now you're doing couple therapy. And what happened was your partner turned because I asked him to, and this is what he said. And you're here. Can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you feel your back against the chair? Can you breathe with me? You're here with me, and this came up because of what he said. Your brain went into thinking that this was danger, and it was danger for you, and your brains held it to try and protect you, yeah? But right here, right now, you're in my session with me, and this is what we're doing, and I want you to breathe with me. Can you breathe with me? Yeah. Can you breathe with me? Can you feel your feet? So I bring her back with me. I bring her back into the session. I say, Mary, are you okay? She says, yes. We say, what happened? What happened was you had a flashback. This is what happened. She said, yes. And she's with me, and she's solid, and I go on. So what have I done? I've taken it, I've soothed her, I've co-regulated her, I've reflected with her, I've stayed with it, and I say, are you all right? I want to go back here. She says, yes. I want you to look at your husband. Can you see his face? Can you say it again? And this time I want her to put together the words and the look on his face, which is loving and caring and supportive. And we keep going. I invite you to read the transcript. It's there in the Journal of Marriage and Family Therapy. But we stay with present process. We reflect and distill within and between. What just happened right here? What happened right here was you turned and your anger sort of came out, but basically you asked him if he loved you. Wasn't that what happened? Right. And what happened was, could you help me? You sort of like, I think I sort of saw you almost like take a step back, right? There was something about her tone maybe that was getting to you, but whatever happened was, she asked you this question and you sort of said yes, but you sort of took a step back. He says, well, yeah, wouldn't you? Because usually those questions are the start of a huge fight. So I understand. So you try to call for him, but your anger kind of comes out. So you kind of do it in an angry way. She says, yes, I push. I say, right, so you push, and you step back. You see her pushing, and it feels like she's going to hurt you. It's a shooting gallery. She's going to hurt you. So you push, and you step back, and I guess when he steps back, you get the answer to whether you're loved. You feel like you can't connect with him. She says, oh, I feel all by myself. I see. So you push, and you see her pushing, and you feel like she's trying to hurt you, and you step back and you put up a wall. Is that okay? He says, yeah, I don't want to be hurt. And the more you step back, I guess the more uncertain you are that he loves you. And the more you need to push for an answer, so you push harder. So this relationship is really a very simple dance. You push, and the more you push, the more you step away, and the more you step away, the more you push. And both of you are all alone. That's reflecting the cycle. I was going to get you to do that as an exercise, but I just did it, okay? So that saves us some time. Okay, so you track the dance and you link each person's action to the other person's action into a dance, and you blame the dance. The dance is the dragon. And both of you get caught up in this dreadful dance that leaves you alone. Nobody has to be the bad guy. It's the dance that's the problem because it leaves you alone. Disconnection is the dragon in basic marital distress. Right? So you reflect what's going on, but it might start like, could you help me? You asking him, but it's sort of like you're asking him in a way that's very agitated. And I get the feeling there's something hard for you about listening to this. You sort of go off and give a cognitive answer, and then you don't want to talk anymore. Is that right? And this is what generally happens in this relationship. You go with the between process. Go with what's in front of you. Right? Go with the reality in front of you and distill it. Or you go with the within. Could you help me? You got you sounded angry in the beginning, but then you, when he didn't really respond, I noticed that you started to cry. Could you help me? Is that what usually happens? You show him this angry face, but then something comes up inside of you. There's something very painful underneath this anger. She says, well, I don't want to talk about that. Oh, you don't want to talk about that. So if you tell me I don't want to talk about it, for me that's just like, I'm totally caught. I say, I really understand. There's something about that that's really hard. You stay with the process. There's something about that that's really hard. That what's going to happen? Well, there's no point in talking about it because I tell him that I'm sad and nothing ever happens, you see, and then I just feel sadder and sadder and I see, I understand. You feel sadder and sadder, so really there's no choice for you except to just go with this sort of, you pick up a hammer in your hand and you say, I'll make you respond to me. She says, yes, that's right, because for you to just stay in the sadness, that would be awful, and your feeling is that he's not going to respond anyway. She says, yes, and then you're going to, can you help me? Well, then I'm all by myself with all this sadness. Yeah, I really understand that. You're all by yourself with all this sadness. Yeah. Now listen, how long has that taken? So I've just gone in with between and within, and then what am I going to do? Number 2, I'm unfolding her emotion. I'm going into new emotion, sadness rather than the surface anger she shows. And now I'm going to 3, and I'm going to turn the music, the changed emotional music, into a new dance. I'm going to change the new emotional processing into new signals to create a new response. So have you ever told him that underneath all this anger, you have this sadness and you feel really alone? Well, I'm sure I have. I'm sure I have. What does it feel like to even think about? She goes, no, you haven't, not for the last 20 years anyway. So, what does it feel like right now to even think about turning and telling him? And then I'll help her. Think about turning him and saying, I'll distill it, and you better make it emotional. If you do it real cognitive, it doesn't work. Telling him how this incredible anger takes you over. It doesn't work. Turning and telling him how much it hurts to feel so alone and sad. And like, he's not going to respond to you even if you cry. That must be really hard. I need her in it to give the signal. Can you tell him? Can you share something like that about him? So all she can manage is, she looks at him and she gulps and she said, well, it's hard and I feel sad. That's good. Great. That's a shift. And then you say a bit more and you feel lonely, and she says yes. And then you get to underneath all this anger is all this desperate loneliness and determination to make you respond. And she says yes. I say, then I do it again. Tell him. I get desperate, so all I know to do is get angry with you, and I never show you this soft little girl inside. Yes! Right, then what do? Number 4, you explore how each experiences the new steps. You say, what did it feel like to say that to him? This is new. The kids just put both feet in the lake. You say, oh, what does it feel like? What's the water like? Is it scary? Is it cold? Oh, look, you're standing there. It's okay. Right? So you take this new experience and you say, what's it like? She says, well, actually, I don't usually do that sort of thing. And, actually, felt pretty good, actually. And she's supported by me, so I'm right beside her, so she's not doing it all by herself. Feels pretty good. And then and you say to him, what's it feel like to hear her say that? This is new for him. The people don't thank you for turning the enemy they know into a stranger they don't know. So at first, you've got to be ready for him to be confused, because that's not the person who usually shows up. So he says, what did she say? But you have an amazing memory for interactions because you've done EFT training, and it comes very handy in your own marital arguments. So you know exactly what she said. So you turn, you say, your wife turned and said to you. And listen, I'm going to load it. If I go, your wife turned and said to you, gave you this information. If you make it about information, nothing happens. You have to stay in the emotional channel. Your wife turned and said to you that she was lonely, and underneath all this anger, she's desperate for your attention. What's that like for you to hear? So now I've done it. I'm a bit less scary than her. I've done it, and I'm actually saying to his amygdala, yoo-hoo, new information coming in, not scary, okay, no threat here, yoo-hoo, new information, she's vulnerable. See, new information, yoo-hoo. And if I have to, I'll say it about 5 times, because his amygdala is tuning for threat. And now something else is coming in underneath. I want him to hear it. And he says, and it's strange and unusual. And usually, for some reason, we call it dog and recorder in EFT, people put their right ear down to their shoulder. They go, when their partner turns into someone else, they go, And that's what my dog used to do when my kid used to play recorder to it. My dog used to go, I don't know what that is, right? My doggy brain can't, and that's what people do. So he goes, well, I don't know. I don't really see her as desperate. I say, yes, I understand. You see her as dangerous and trying to hurt you. But what's it like to hear that she's desperate? He said, well, it feels strange. I'm not sure I really believe it, but it's better than her trying to kill me. I say, yes, that's amazing. And then what do? Look at what you did. That's amazing. Look at what you guys just did. You've been stuck in this pattern forever. And just with a little bit of help from me, you played a new music and you did a new dance and you took a lot of risks. You turned and told him about your sadness and you struggled to hear her, but you heard her. You heard her and you were able to tell her, it's hard, I don't quite know what to do with this, but I guess I can hear you. I never saw you that way. That's amazing. Look at what you did. What am I saying? The same thing as a mother says to the little kid in the leg. Oh, you're so clever. You put your whole foot in. You're such a brave boy. Look at what you did. You were scared, but you went towards the leg. You put your foot in. And what's the message the kid gets? The kid gets the message, I can do this, I'm competent, I'm fine, the lake can be scary, I can still put my foot in. And you need to give your couples that message. You can do this. We understand what love is. You can do it even if you've never even seen what this dance looks like, because the longing for it is wired into your brain. And I'm going to show you how, and your emotions are going to help me after a while. You can do this, right? Love makes sense, and we can show you how to shape this loving connection. And then people the lake literally starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. The threat starts to shrink, and people start to be able to explore. But you do this again and again and again. Focus on present process. If you get stuck and lost in a session, and with trauma survivors you will, because all kinds of chaos is taking off, if you get stuck and lost, you say, I'm sorry, I'm getting stuck and lost. Could we stop, please? Good. You say, stop! Because you have to create enough safety in the session for people to start to open up and explore, or you can't do EFT. What is the contraindication for EFT? That you can't create any safety in this session with this couple. So you have to be able to create safety, and once you have the beginnings of an alliance and some safety, then you go into present process. You explore present process within and between, and then you go gradually, slowly, especially if you're working with trauma, little bit at a time, into the emotion. You recognize the surface emotion, and we're going to do an exercise on numbing. The surface emotion right now, you feel numb, right? You really are good at just sort of standing back and numbing out, so that even when your partner says this to you, you can manage to shut down. Notice I make it an activity. He says it just happens to be, that's just the way it is. I frame it as an activity. You shut it down. I use verbs. You shut it down. That implies effort. He's got to actually actively shut it down, right? And even when she says this to you, you can find a way. He says, yes. It's like I hear it from a long way away. I say, yeah, I get that. And that is such a good skill for you to have. When you were growing up, that saved your life. That was such a good skill. But right here, right now, when she tries to tell you what's in her heart, you end up being a long way away because you can't feel it. He says, yeah. I say, right, I understand. And then we can go and explore that, right? So you're always doing this. You're going for the underlying feelings. You're turning, even if he was able to turn and say to her, it's hard for me to hear you because I'm so used to numbing out. I just go way behind my wall. My whole life is waiting, listening for a cue, being vigilant for threat, and going behind my wall, so I numb you out. It's so hard for me to hear, even when you're giving me love. Can you tell her that, please? Right? Now, all he's done is he's acknowledged where he's standing, but that in itself is a change. If he can't shift, acknowledging how he's standing and the music he's playing is a shift. And as he starts to do that, his wife starts to understand he needs to numb out. It's not because he doesn't care about me. If you don't help partners understand the impact they have on each other and how each person's processing emotion, if you don't help partners understand the symptoms of PTSD and how this impacts the dance and the emotion, they take everything personally. One of the big shifts that happens in PTSD is when partners start to understand this is the dragon standing behind me that my partner's responding to, not me. I don't have to take this symptom personally. This is my partner moving into threat. That creates, how can I help my partner because with the dragon, rather than my partner's trying to hurt me. My partner's trying to do me in. My partner is angry at me, they hate me, I've lost them, or my partner doesn't care for me at all, they're numbing out. If you don't help couples, they take the symptoms of PTSD personally. Just like distressed couples where there's no dragon in the room, take the way the other person deals with the threat of rejection and abandonment personally and says, this person doesn't care about me, or this person just wants to hurt me. Everybody with me? Okay, so we need to speed up. I'm not going to talk about EFT research. Maybe I'll talk about it tomorrow, but I am going to just touch on this because it's really relevant to EFT with trauma. Creating responsiveness to threat with changing responsiveness to threat with EFT. Our latest study, which is in early view in the Journal of Marriage and Family Therapy, for the first time ever, we took insecurely attached couples who were distressed in their relationship, and we not only moved them into more satisfaction and more intimacy, we changed their, if you like, their attachment styles. We changed their security of their attachment. So anxiously attached people became less anxious and more able to risk and be open and accessible and responsive to their partner. Avoidantly attached people became less withdrawn, less numbed out, and more accessible, responsive, and engaged with their partner. And they started to see their partner differently, right? So that's the first time anyone has changed attachment in couple therapy, and we can talk a bit more about that this afternoon if you like. We'll have a period of questions. As part of that project, we also, with my friend Jim Cohn, put the couples into a brain scan. So this is the sort of funny because couple therapists don't usually do this kind of research. Anyway, we put the women who were insecurely attached, either avoidant or anxious, and maritally distressed, relationship distressed, into the brain scan, and we told them, when you're lying in the scanner, which is a bit scary, your head's in a cage, you can't move your head, this machine's all around you. When you're lying in the scanner, you'll see an X. When you see the X, there's a 30% chance you'll be shocked on your ankles. So when the woman lies, before therapy, the woman lies alone in the machine, with a stranger holding their hand, or with their partner holding their hand. Doesn't make any difference. When she sees the X, her brain looks like this. It lights up like a Christmas tree. Please note, the partner makes no difference to how she processes threat. 20 sessions of EFT and hold me tight conversations later. The woman lies alone in the machine. She sees the X. Her brain looks like this. The woman has a stranger hold her hand. She sees the X. Her brain lights up a little bit less, but basically it looks like this. After 20 sessions of EFT, she sees the X, which tells her that she's going to be shocked on her ankles. Her partner holds her hand, and her brain looks like that. That's a resting brain. I asked Jim Cohn what the blue bits were, and he said it means she's not dead. Not only that, but in the first condition, she said the shock was very painful. In this condition, she said the shock was uncomfortable. That's really interesting. What are we seeing? We're seeing the mammalian brain use the greatest resource we have for the regulation of emotion. Attachment is all about the regulation of emotion, having our emotional balance and losing our emotional balance in the face of threat. That's what it's about. Safe haven, secure base, relationships. So what this is saying is that this is the effect of safe emotional connection with someone you trust who will be there for you when you face a dragon, when you face threat, in this case the threat of electric shock. Please note, she is not controlling the fear more, because if she was, her prefrontal cortex would be all lit up. That's the control center. She is actually perceiving and encoding the threat as less. She actually shrinks the dragon. She's not controlling her fear of the dragon more. She's actually shrunk the dragon. She actually says, it's a shock, what the hell? Jim is holding my hand. Everybody got that? It's really interesting. And it says something about the power of creating this emotional connection with someone you love when they're dealing with massive, overwhelming threat in a huge part of their lives. It says something about that, right? And how that works and how it's a literal physiological change. Okay, so we have talked about staying in the present moment, going to primary affect, what we call deeper affect, the feelings underneath the surface in EFT. We've talked about, but I don't want to talk about it right now. We've talked about staying with process, not going into content, looking at feedback loops. The therapist here is a process consultant for how you get stuck in disconnection or how you can move towards connection. Emotion, we have to do this one because we're talking so much about emotion regulation. If you know EFT, you know this already. If you think about the elements of emotion, the cue, rapid appraisal of the environment, body arousal. How are we doing here? I'm losing my time. Cue, rapid appraisal of the environment, body arousal, meaning reappraisal, and action tendency. So if you do EFT, when you think about emotion, you think about it as a conglomerate of all those Then, of course, you have people's awareness or lack of awareness about this process, right? So the cue, an expression on somebody's face, a rapid perception, bad, dangerous, painful, right? And all the person's done is frown, but he's a vet, and you're terrified of him going into rages, and he goes into rages at any tiny little thing you've done wrong. So his face changes, something in your brain says, bad, bad, dangerous, dangerous, body arousal. Your heart starts to race, your face becomes flushed, right? It's like your blood goes to your feet, you start to get ready to flee, meaning, oh my God, he's going to get mad again. He's going to get mad again like always, and there's going to be nothing I can do. Body action, run. Fight, flee, or freeze, run. I'm going to leave. And you say to him, I've got to go out and pick up the children, okay? I'll be back later. I've got to go out. And he says, no, you're not. You don't have to go pick up the kids. You're just avoiding me. Yeah, okay, I got to go. And he says, every time I try to talk to you, you avoid me. And he gets angrier and angrier and angrier. But he got me that you go here. If you understand these are the elements of emotion, you can go in and help somebody make sense of their emotion, put it together. When somebody's numbed out, you can go into these elements and help them tune into these elements and help them start to put it together. We understand so much more about emotion than we did when we first started EFT. When we first started EFT, we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. You know, we actually just let our clients guide us and did what made sense to them and what seemed to help them shift, right? But now we know so much about what we're doing when we're working with emotion. Emotion's a source of information. It tells you what you need. If couples are going to ask each other for what they need, they have to be emotionally engaged. It is your emotions that tell you what you need. Years ago, I used to have conversations with Neil Jacobson, the father of cognitive behavioral marital therapy, and he said to me, you're wasting so much time. You just go in and you ask them what they need, and then they negotiate it with their partner. I said, well, there's lots of things wrong with that, but the first thing is they don't know what they need. He says, what are you talking about? Your men usually need more sex? I said, no, it's not as easy as that. And then we'd have a big fight, okay? So, emotions tell you what you need. They're a vital element in meaning. They prime an action. They prime approach. They prime withdrawal. They prime how you move in the dance. But the key thing is they communicate. Emotional music organizes social interactions. And for that reason, you have to be able to go in and work with them, especially with trauma survivors. And when you really think about it, if you say we've got to work with all emotions, my goodness me, what an overwhelming task. No, there are 6 core emotions. Anger, comes from Paul Ekman's work. There are 6 emotions that you show on your face that everyone on this planet can tune into and give the same meaning to. Anger, which is all about asserting and defending the self, and which is often in couples that you see is a reactive emotion. It's a surface emotion. Anger. Sadness, which is all about seeking support or withdrawing. Surprise and excitement, attending and explore. Disgust and shame. The action tendency is to hide. Fear, flee, freeze, give up the goal. Sometimes leads back into anger, fight. And joy, which is all about contact. So couples don't come in and say, I have entirely too much joy and surprise in this relationship. When they come in with anger, it's usually reactive, although it can come up later in therapy as a balanced form of assertiveness, which is, I'm not going to let you tell me I'm no good anymore. I want you to stop that. I want you to stop smacking me. I do want to be with you. I don't always know how to do it. But if you actually said to the person at that point, are you really angry right now? They'd say, no, I don't really feel anger. It's more like an assertiveness. But what we end up doing dealing with underneath feelings are the softer feelings. Sadness about loss, about being alone, shame, I'm unlovable, there's something wrong with me. In trauma, that translates to bad things happen to me because I'm a bad person. And, you know, people's social environment really tunes into that. We really do give people that message. Well, there must have been something you could have done. You got raped. What were you doing there in the parking lot? And the husband says that because he doesn't know what else to say. And what his wife hears is, it's your fault. You invited that rape. It's your fault. Right? By the way, PTSD effects for rape are something like, last study I read was 46% of women who were raped developed full-blown PTSD. So rape is a really powerful trauma trigger. Okay, so fear, so people are dealing with sadness, shame, which gets you to hide and shut down. So we contain it a lot in EFT because we don't want the person to go off and hide. We want them to come out and be with their partner. So at certain points in therapy, you can contain it. But in the end, with someone like an incest survivor, you've got to go in and work with it because the shame says, I'm worthless, there's something wrong with me, and if this person really sees me, they won't want me. I'm not desirable, I'm not entitled to love. So then you have to go in and work with that. And fear of rejection and abandonment. So in the end, what you're usually finding underneath this dance that becomes automatic with people, and even more automatic with a trauma survivor, is underlying sadness and loss, shame about the nature of self. There's something wrong with me, I'm a failure, I'm unworthy, right? And all kinds of fear. Fear about feelings themselves, fear about being overwhelmed by the trauma, or just fear of emotional isolation, rejection, and abandonment, which is enough for most of us to deal with. It's still hard. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on, we had a little bit of a long break, so I'm going to touch on attachment, and then we're going to stop and have lunch, come back and finish attachment and go into trauma. So the code of attachment says that we have a primary need for felt security. Please note the word felt. This is not an abstract idea. You have to feel the connection with the other person. It's felt in the body. Right? Just like you feel that certain situations are dangerous, you feel this security with this other person. It's a felt sense of security, a safe haven to go to, and a secure base to go out from. One of the hang-ups that people have about adult attachment is they say adults shouldn't need other people. We've pathologized dependency, especially in this culture. So what this basically says is it recognizes all the research that says the children that are able to go out and be independent and take risks and deal with the world are the ones that know that other people have their back. It's the securely attached kids who have positive dependency, safe haven with at least one other person that are confident in themselves, feel competent, know they can regulate their emotions, know they can turn to other people, know that risks are survivable, know that they can deal with their own feelings. Those are the kids that look where mum is, see she's over there, and they go out and risk going down the slide by themselves. And then when they've done it, they look back to see if she's there, and she's there and she smiles at them. And they say, I can do it. Anyone seen the wonderful little thing about the kid on YouTube where she's going on these parallel bars and swinging, and her dad is standing right there like this, and she says, let go, I don't need you, I need you, don't let go, I don't need you, I need you. And every time she says, I need you, the dad sort of moves in like this a little bit, right? And then he lets her go again. And at the end, it's like, I did it by myself. And I think we're like that as adults too. It's like, I need you, I'm fine by myself, I'm fine, I can do it myself. Chris Fraley found, no, wrong one. Feeney found that young career women who said they could confide in their partner and turn to their partner for emotional support, those women were more confident when they went out into the world. They took more risks and they reached their career goals faster. So we've had it wrong in this profession and in our society. How you create confident risk-taking, autonomy, and separateness is you start with connection. Secure connection is what builds that ability to risk. Everybody know what I mean? And I'm going to give you an example, and then we're going to stop for lunch. And if you've heard me speak, you might have heard this before. For example, somebody said to me at one of these workshops years ago, gee, you emigrated when you were just 21 with no money to speak of, on a boat across to North America, and you emigrated all by yourself. That must have been terrifying. You must have been very brave. And I thought about that, and I thought, why do I not remember being very brave? I can't remember that. And I thought about it, and then I realized, I wasn't by myself. I had my father with me the whole time, because my father was my main attachment figure, and his message to me all through my life was, you can do it, you're fine. And what he said to me about this, I said, Dad, I'm going to go off to North America, I don't have hardly any money. I'm going to go someplace called Vancouver, and it looks nice, I've seen a book, and I think I can not starve because the university will pay me a bit to teach these courses. I don't know, I think I'm a TA, but I don't even know what that means. But I'm going, okay? And I've booked on this boat. Now, any sane parent would have said, what are you talking about? But he, bless his heart, he said, oh, well, sweetie, that's amazing. And yeah, and that'll be an enormous adventure. And you can do that. You're strong enough to do that. You can do that. And, I'll be thinking of you. And, and if it really doesn't work and it's too much, I'll somehow find the money and bring you home. So then when I'm standing on a heaving grey ocean, all by myself on the top deck of this damn ship, and I'm thinking, never mind North America, the bloody ship's going to sink. Because it's okay, and everyone else is throwing up, right, except me. And what am I doing? I'm doing what he taught me to do. He was a sailor. He said, when the ocean gets rough, listen, he taught me. You stand with your feet wide so you have your balance. And you look at the horizon where you're going, and you think of me and breathe. And you'll be fine. So that's what I did. And just as I did this, this little bird came down out of the sky and was like, a ship, right? I guess he was tired by this point. And we both looked at each other, right? Like, what are you doing here? We both looked at each other, and I sort of said something to the bird like, just breathe, okay? We'll be okay here. But that came from my father. So I didn't cross the ocean alone. And at that moment when I was near to panic on that ship, I wasn't by myself. My dad was with me. He said, get your balance, breathe, look at the horizon, think of me. So that's secure attachment, creating a secure base to go out into the world. Right? And that's what we want in couple therapy. We want to work with our couples so that each person gives the other a secure base to become alive again, to open up to risk again, to open up to life again, and to look the dragon in the eye and say, I see you, and I can cope with you, and I don't have to do it by myself. I've got my balance, I'll stand here, I'll look, and I've got somebody with me. And it doesn't matter how rough the sea gets, I'm here, I'm going to be okay. And that's secure attachment, yeah?